Chapter 678. Night had fallen, and the moon and stars were in the sky. The entire Cloud City was as bright as day. Phoenix lanterns filled the sky, and the shadows of phoenixes cruised on the lantern walls. There were festooned carriages parading the streets, cloud platforms displaying rare treasures, acrobats, lantern riddles, peddlers. The pedestrians were woven together. Jiang Anan sat in the largest phoenix lantern. Before her eyes was the shadow of the phoenix lantern. Looking up, she saw the sky full of stars. Looking down, she saw the fireworks of the human world. When she spent New Year's Eve in Fengxi Town, the town was also very lively. There was delicious food, red lanterns, and firecrackers. Last year's New Year's Eve in a barren mountain, her brother set off fireworks for her. This was the first time she experienced such a grand bustle. It was like she was in a beautiful dream filled with flowing lights and vibrant colors. It made her forget to go home and forget about her worries. She couldn't remember those inexhaustible copybooks at the moment. For the current Jiang Anan, those copybooks were her only worry. Yi Qingyu watched over her from the side and occasionally pointed out some interesting places for her to see. Occasionally, she would cast a spell and sprinkle a rain of light to celebrate New Year's Eve with the people of Cloud City. Jiang Anan smiled brightly and asked, "Where's my brother?" "I don't know." Yi Qingyu was also very puzzled. "Did he go to prepare a New Year's gift for you?" "Oh." Jiang Anan held her small face expectantly. "I also want to prepare a New Year's gift for my brother. Then let's play for a while and go down to buy one for him. Look over there." "Wow, so beautiful." The naive child was carefree. The youth with the sword flew swiftly under the night sky. He flew over the dead city of Maplewood, flew over the 800 li of Qingjiang, flew over Wangjiang, and flew towards Hualien County. On New Year's Eve, the Zhuang Kingdom didn't have much of the festive atmosphere of the new year. The entire country was enveloped in a heroic mood. The people were full of hatred for their neighbors in the north. The battle that happened in Yang's Yiyang Prefecture affected the hearts of every Zhuang citizen. They anxiously waited for the result and fervently hoped for the outcome. The Zhuang Kingdom mobilized an army of 300,000 this time. Other than the necessary border defense troops, they mobilized almost all of their military forces. The vanguard had just broken through the defensive line when the army behind caught up. Earlier, they used the excuse of a small-scale conflict with the Mo Kingdom to train the army in Hualien County. It was probably only today that people who were observant could see the real reason. Zhuang Gaoxian had definitely planned this war against Yong for a long time. On the other hand, the Mo Kingdom, which had ceded 10 cities in one battle, was no longer viewed as an important opponent by the Zhuang Kingdom. If the Mo Kingdom had not paid a huge price to obtain the support of the Qin Kingdom, Zhuang Gaoxian would have destroyed the Mo Palace. Therefore, from the very beginning, the friction of the border of Zhuang Mo and the trials of the new soldiers were all just a smokescreen. They were all preparations for the war against Yong. It was said that Zhuang Mo's frontline troops were all trained and rotated in Hualien County. However, in reality, only the higher-ups of the Zhuang country knew how many troops were stationed in Hualien County, how many were dispatched, the routes of each division, and how many were in Qinghe County. Before the start of the Kingdom War, a large number of troops had been transferred to Qinghe County in the name of rotation. On one side, Zhuang Gaoxian smashed the Dragon Throne in a fit of rage. On the other side, the entire army of the Zhuang country was like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. This was definitely not something that could be prepared in a short period of time. This kind of preparation might have started many years ago when Zhuang Gaoxian was still recuperating in the depths of the palace. Otherwise, there was no way to explain this kind of cohesion and efficiency. Xian City. Tall candles were burning in the Wenhua Pavilion. There were people going in and out continuously. They were either eunuchs or guards, passing on all kinds of information. There were 6 rows of tables in the pavilion, 3 on the left and 3 on the right. All the officials in Xian City who were in a position of power were here, riding furiously and completing one official task after another. During the Kingdom War, all kinds of matters were hard to handle. It was not easy to maintain the operations of an army of 300,000 soldiers. Only the most important matters would be summarized and passed to the short-bearded middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table. The vice minister of the Zhuang country sat upright and did not smile. Occasionally, he would shift his gaze as if he wanted to see through people's hearts. Behind him stood a young cultivator with a sword in his arms. Everyone in the pavilion knew that this young cultivator with bright eyes was Vice Minister Dong A's personal disciple, Li Jianxiu. It was said that they had a master-disciple relationship in Maplewood City's Dao Academy and were highly regarded by the vice minister. When Dong A was handling official matters, he would occasionally ask for Li Jianxiu's opinion in a low voice. One could see how much effort he put into grooming Li Jianxiu. Many people were secretly jealous of him. As the vice minister, Dong A was in charge of criminal investigations. He had real power, and his position was not below the arrest department's grand minister. No matter how one looked at it, he could be ranked among the top 10 in the entire Zhuang country's power structure. This time, the Zhuang country went to war. The Zhuang emperor ordered Dong A to stay in Exant and city and oversee the rear. This was enough to show his trust in him. Many people even saw him as the next minister of state. His status had already surpassed that of the Grand Minister of the Arrest Department. Among all the civil and military officials in the entire Zhuang country, he was probably only below Minister of State Duru Hui and Great General Huang Fu Duanming. Duru Hui had sacrificed too much for the Zhuang country. He had worked hard for too long and enjoyed the Zhuang country's fortune. However, he was also burdened by the Zhuang country. Now, the Zhuang country was rising. As a top-notch god, it was time for him to put down his heavy burden and focus on cultivation. If he could see through the truth, it would be even more fortunate for the Zhuang country. Duru Hui himself had also expressed many times that he wanted Dong A to succeed him as the vice minister. To be valued by such a powerful figure, it was not hard to imagine how many people hated and envied this Li Jianxiu. There shouldn't be anything else. Leave 10 people behind to keep watch. The rest of you can go back and rest. After approving the last official document, Dong A stood up and walked out. I will go and inspect the city's affairs. He knew that if he did not leave first, no one would dare to go and rest. A civil official immediately stood up and said, "How can we trouble Vice Minister? Let me handle such a small matter." Dong A waved his hand and stopped him. This war will determine the fate of the country for the next 100 years. All of you are the pillars of the country. At this moment in history, do your part well and contribute greatly to the country. There are some things that I can do, so I will do it myself. The officials were already familiar with this vice minister's character. They knew that he would not change his mind. He was upright and outspoken and did not like empty formalities. Therefore, no one tried to persuade him. Leaving 10 officials behind to keep watch, the rest of them dispersed. Although it was said to be rest, no one could rest. Every official had their own matters to attend to. Zhuang Gaoxian had staked everything on this war. Even the White Feather Army had been transferred to the front lines. Xian and city was at its most empty. Dong personally attended to everything and even personally inspected the city's affairs. He was afraid that everyone's attention would be on the Yong battlefield and neglect domestic affairs. The secretive Grand Secretary of the Arrest Department was currently overseeing Zhuang Mo's front lines to prevent the Mo Kingdom from taking advantage of the situation. If the Mo Kingdom dared to harbor evil intentions, they would have to bite a hard bone. On the border with the Cheng Kingdom, there are also troops ready. Dong A walked on the wide streets of Xian City, thinking about a myriad of things. Li Jianxiu, who followed behind him, spoke very little. Basically, he only answered when Dong A asked a question. The long street stretched into the distance, between a row of pitch-black houses. There was a house with a red lantern hanging in front of it. In Xian and city, which was immersed in the atmosphere of national war, these two red lanterns seemed somewhat out of place. It was untimely and festive. "Tonight is New Year's Eve," Dong A said. On the frosty street, Li Jianxiu grunted. Chapter 679. There were few stars at night in Xian city. Only a few stars could be seen. The moon was not bright either. Tonight, most of the families in Zhuang were not reunited. In most of the closed houses, there were people far away in the Yong border, fighting and killing. They were the fathers of children, the husbands of wives, and the sons of parents. They would not come back tonight. Perhaps they would never come back. There was a long silence. The sound of boots stepping on the stone bricks was steady and slow. The two red lanterns were left far behind, guarding the joyous atmosphere of this day. There were many untimely stubbornness. The houses and pavilions hidden in the night were always silent. Jinxiu, how long have you been with me? Dong suddenly asked. I've been with you since I entered the National Academy, Li Jinxiu said. Dong did not look back. He walked forward slowly. You've been with me for so long. There are some things that I don't hide from you. With your intelligence, you should have guessed something. Am I right? Li Jinxiu followed behind him slowly. He did not speak. Silence was acknowledgement. Dong A's resolute face moved in the dark night, like a dreary reef in a black wave. Do you hate me? He asked. But he did not even look back to see Li Jinxiu's expression, because he already knew the answer to this question. Li Jinxiu paused for a moment, but continued to follow. His steps were much heavier. Yes, he said. Have you ever thought of killing me? After Dong A asked this question, he immediately shook his head and answered his own question. You can't kill me. He added, you can't kill me either. He walked in front so confidently and calmly that he did not think there was any danger behind him. Can't kill me and can't kill me were two different meanings. Li Jinxiu understood. He did not speak, but his grip on the sword tightened. Because compared to your own love and hate, you love this country more. Dong A sighed for some reason. This is why I chose you. Li Jinxiu's sword was called Peach Branch. Peach Branch would bloom in spring. Tonight was the last night of the 12th lunar month. Tomorrow would be the new year. Would the new year be tomorrow? He was actually a little hesitant. Holding the peach branch and feeling the breathing of the sword, he felt that he was real. The past of Maplewood City was like a nightmare that would often emerge in the dead of night. He often felt that he was not awake, but living in a false dream. Only the peach branch allowed him to touch reality. Perhaps. Li Jinxiu held the peach branch tightly and said, perhaps I'm very stupid and don't know what's right and what's wrong. Perhaps my soul isn't clear-headed and can only be manipulated by others. His tone was sorrowful. Dong didn't comment on who was right or wrong, nor did she tell him who was right or wrong. She only asked, do you know why teacher didn't hide the truth from you and let you know about that matter? Li Jinxiu lowered his eyes. I don't know. Dong had always been upright, honest, fair, and cherished a reputation. Although he had long since accepted him as his personal disciple and had always kept him by his side, he would usually refer to himself as this minister or this official. He would never refer to himself as teacher. Li Jinxiu was not used to it. Dong, it was still moving forward, just like the days he had been in office. He was always doing things, always walking. He followed the path of his life. He was firm, persistent, and self-controlled. He said, I don't care if you hate me or not. When I'm of no benefit to the country, I don't mind if you kill me. His Majesty and the minister see Zhu Weiwa as the future and have high hopes for him. But in my opinion, Zhu Weiwa is too self-centered. Only you know how to sacrifice. Sacrifice is a sacred quality. It is the foundation of greatness. Jinxiu, regarding the past, I don't agree with His Majesty and Minister Du's thoughts. There are some things that cannot be hidden. Deceit is never the best choice. Perhaps I'm right, perhaps I'm wrong. But if one day the entire Zhuang country falls into darkness, you are the fire seed that I keep for this land. Li Jinxiu held his sword tightly and didn't know how to respond. Dong A didn't wait for his response. Perhaps she was looking forward to it, but she didn't have to wait for too long. I have an urgent matter for you to do. Dong A took out a black square token and handed it to Li Jinxiu. Go to Zhuang Mo's front line now and give this token to the Grand Minister hiding there. He will know what to do. Li Jinxiu took the token. He still hadn't digested the previous words. Dong A urged him again. The military situation is urgent. Go quickly. Li Jianxiu rose from the ground and turned around in the air. He flew towards Zhuang Mo's front line and soon disappeared into the endless night. Dong A stood alone on the empty long street and didn't walk forward. There was still a long way ahead, but he stopped here. "Come out," he said. Dark clouds crept in and hid the moon. The long street became darker. It became gloomier and darker. The young man with the sword came out from the corner of the street and took off his stealth clothes. He stared at Dong A's back. "I wonder where he is." Dong A turned around and saw the appearance of the young man across the long street. "It's you." He had already noticed that someone was hiding and spying on him, but he couldn't find where that person was. Such an elusive opponent, if he wasn't the target, he might cause more destruction in Xian City. That was why he came out alone, to give the other party a chance to lure out the hidden opponent. He wanted to deal with the enemy personally and take the risk as the vice minister. Because the current Xian City was indeed the emptiest in history. He knew this better than anyone. He was confident in his own strength, but he was also prepared to die in battle. The only person who could be the backbone of the Zhuang kingdom right now was the head of the arrest department. Seeing the black square token, the head of the arrest department would naturally know what to do. During this process, he didn't give Li Jianxiu any hints, because once he did, Li Jianxiu would be seen as a variable and might be killed immediately. He knew that the enemy in the dark must be watching his every move. He could have used Li Jianxiu to take the initiative, but he didn't want to do so anymore. At least, he didn't want to do it for himself. He thought that the opponent was from Yong, Mo, Luo, or Qingjiang Underwater Prefecture. It wasn't impossible. There was no such thing as an alliance that could be trusted. But he really didn't expect it to be Jiang Wang. It was Jiang Wang, the disciple he personally took into Maplewood City's Tao Academy. The young man who was betrayed by his brother and fought to the death to end the grudge. The young man who didn't care about his own safety and trusted him. The young man who mistakenly thought that he was the path chosen of the white bone path and confessed to him with red eyes. Jiang Wang didn't die. The night was so dark that it seemed like it was going to tilt. It was as if the entire sky was pressing down on people's hearts. On the long street, the former master and disciple stood on opposite ends. Maybe it was because the night was too dark, or maybe it was because the night was too quiet, but the long street was like an abyss that swallowed all light and emotions, making the distance between the two seem so far. "Teacher, long time no see," Jiang Wang said. Chapter 680. Jiang Wang couldn't explain why he suddenly made the decision to put down the joy of gathering with Jiang and in Cloud City, to put down the beauty of the lively atmosphere, and to travel thousands of miles alone to come to Xian City. In the Maple Forest Dead Zone, in Zhejiang City, he kept telling himself that revenge needed a long time of suffering. Dong A, Du Rui, Zhuang Gaoxian, they were at the top of the Zhuang state and held great power. Their cultivations were strong. It was not easy to deal with them. There were countless reasons to stop him from coming here. But there was only one reason that forced him to come. Because of hatred. Because of unforgettable hatred. Hatred gnawed at his heart every moment. He couldn't forgive, let go, and let go. Zhuang Gaoxian fought with all his might, shocking the western region and attracting the attention of countless people. But he only saw Dong A alone in the rear. Zhuang Gaoxian was a perfected person, and Du Ruhui had the distance between us. When would they have no time to care about the vice minister of the Zhuang state? Only in a war that concerned the fate of the country. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. Jiang Wang chose to follow his heart. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't tell Anin, nor did he tell Yi Qingyu. Not only because he promised Yi Lingxiao that he wouldn't involve the cabinet of Cloud. When it came to revenge, he was alone. He bore all the hardships and pain alone. With the help of the invisibility cloak, he came and went freely in the Wenhua Pavilion. Enough hatred gave him enough patience. He waited patiently for an opportunity, waiting for the moment when Dong A was alone. It was the first time he observed Dong A from such an angle. He observed the only teacher he acknowledged for so long. He waited for Dong A to deal with official business, for Dong A to teach Li Jianxiu, and for Dong A to leave the Wenhua Pavilion Guan's invisibility cloak shouldn't be seen through. But in the process of moving, it was inevitable that he would reveal flaws. Dong probably found him at that time. It didn't matter. When they were alone, Jiang Wang didn't intend to hide. He didn't want Dong not to know why he died and who killed him when he killed him. Now, on this New Year's Eve, on this long street in the dark night, after a year, he finally saw Dong again. The city beneath his feet was a place he had once yearned for. There were countless nights in the Taoist Academy in the city. Of course, he had imagined that he would one day succeed in his cultivation. Internally, he would be in the imperial court, managing the affairs of the nation. Externally, he would be in charge of a region, benefiting the people. Of course, he had also imagined how majestic he would look when he wore the Zhuang nation's official uniform. Those young, frivolous, high-spirited, those fantasies were all shattered, broken into pieces in that messy nightmare. It was the naivety of waking up in the middle of the night countless times and never returning. This was his first time in Xian'an City, and it was completely different from what he had imagined. But this was reality. This was the cruel part of life. Jiang Wang had already learned to face it. Therefore, he held his sword with a steady hand and a calm expression as he stared at Dong. Dong still had that unsmiling look on his face. He was resolute and solemn, as if nothing could move him. There was no factor that could change his attitude. That's right. It's been a long time. Dong said. The clouds were getting thicker and thicker, and the moon was already far away. In the dark night, not a single star could be seen. It was going to rain. Jiang Wang thought. There was no need for any other words. Jiang Wang knew why he was here, and Dong knew why he was here. Therefore, they moved forward. The two of them greeted each other at the two ends of the long street. Then, they took a step forward at the same time. The air was broken. They began to run. Their bodies were so fast that they left afterimages. Their feet stepped on the floor tiles, creating small pits. Bang, bang, bang. The consecutive sounds were so dense that it seemed as if there was only one sound. The force of the rebound and the force of the forward movement kept overlapping. In less than a breath's time, the two of them had already collided, fist against fist, and their eyes stared at each other. In Dong-A's eyes, Jiang Wang did not see any emotion, only seriousness. In Jiang Wang's eyes, Dong-A only saw blood-red hatred. The two of them stopped in the middle of the long street. Behind them, the floor tiles cracked one by one, and long cracks spread on both sides. Only the place where they stood was still intact. The true samadhi fire jumped out and jumped onto Dong-A's fist. Dong-A waved his hand casually, but the flame did not extinguish. Instead, it had already burned half of his fist. His left hand slashed down like a knife, directly cutting off his right arm. The true samadhi fire on this arm was still stubbornly spreading on the ground. And Dong-A's severed arm quickly grew granulation, expanded, grew, and recovered to its original state. As soon as they clashed, both of them had already used their supernatural powers. Whoosh! A dazzling sword light shone. There was no moon tonight, but it became a bright moon. It was not the moon in the sky, but the moon in the human world. The sword light scattered into moonlight, incomparably soft but inescapable. Before this, Jiang Wang had never used this sword. When he saw Dong-A, this sword naturally emerged in his heart. This sword was called Yearning. Everyone knew the moon, and everyone missed it. But Jiang Wang's sword was not a lover's yearning to the bone, but endless hatred. It was like the bright moon since ancient times, and it would not rest until death. Countless nights, he looked up at the bright moon, but what he saw was Dong-A's throat. Hatred grew on countless nights, and he could not find a moment of peace. Ling He, Zhao Ruqing, Zhao Lang, Wei Yin, Huang Azan, Tang Dun, Xiao Timian, those people in Maplewood City did not have to die. He had once trusted him. He had once respected and revered Dong-A. This sword contained all his emotions and all his words. He had thought for too long about killing his master with a disciple. The more he respected in the past, the more he hated later. This was the yearning of the sword yearning. When he saw this sword, Dong had already felt all the pain and suffering in Jiang Wang's heart. There was no need for words. It was all in this sword. Jiang Wang not only hated Dong A, but he also hated himself. He hated himself for believing in the wrong person, for not being able to save Maplewood City, where he grew up, and for letting his hometown become a dead place forever. He hated others and hated himself. This hatred weighed heavily on Jiang Wang's heart. It made him unable to be happy, unable to relax, and accumulated depression for the rest of his life. This was an extremely stunning sword, but also an extremely heavy sword. Facing this sword, Dong A wiped his right hand and pulled out an iron ruler. This ruler was upright, solemn, and dignified. One side was black, and the other side was white. The two sides were clearly separated, and the boundaries were strict. This was the double boundary ruler, which was raised by the criminal authority of the Zhuang state. It was the famous weapon of the country. It determined good and evil, right and wrong, distinguished the clear from the turbid, and judged life and death. The iron ruler stood upright like a sharp blade, blocking the sword light that was like the bright moon. It also issued a question, interrogating his heart. Was it right to commit murder on the street? Was it right to murder an old friend? Was it right to kill his master with a disciple? The ruler resisted the sword, and Dong A's left hand opened wide and pressed to the ground. Throughout the long street, tree buds constantly drilled out of the ground, smashed the floor tiles, and rapidly grew and expanded. All the wooden products, carts, and shelves scattered on the long street. Except for the doors and windows of the houses on both sides that were deliberately avoided, everything made of wood had already changed. Giant trees broke out of the ground, and thorns danced wildly. In just an instant, this world became a prison cell, and it was green like a cage. Chapter 681. Nights in Yong were different from nights in Zhuang. Everyone had their own joys and sorrows. After the fall of Ling Bei, Yang became the most important line of defense in Yang's southern region. The Dragon Ceiling Pass in Yang was once Yang's most impregnable pass. Ever since Yang's territory crossed the Qichang Mountains and expanded into Zhuang, this impregnable pass lost its strategic significance. After Zhuang Changxian split the land of Zhuang and established his country, the Dragon Ceiling Pass regained some of its value. However, it wasn't valued too much. Most of Yang's defense was actually built around the Qichang Mountains. Unfortunately, on the 29th day of the 12th lunar month, Zhuang's Grand General Huangfu Duanming led his troops in a surprise attack. The southern border that Yang had spent a great deal of manpower and resources was destroyed before it could be used. Fortunately, the Dragon Ceiling Pass had its history. The city walls and formation patterns were still there, blocking the second wave of Zhuang's army until Han Yin arrived. At this point, Zhuang's strategic intentions were very clear. Zhuang Gaoxian personally led his troops in a battle, using the entirety of his country to fight. He put all of his chips on the line, not intending to fight a protracted war with Yang. Instead, he wanted to end the war quickly. Before Yang could mobilize most of its military potential, he would cross the Qichang Mountains and march straight into Yang's capital, Tianming Prefecture. The Zhejiang Profound Armor and White Feather Army, the two most elite troops, were placed at the vanguard, charging forward like the arrowhead. The ordinary troops stayed behind to stabilize the defensive line and secure victory. At the beginning, they achieved very impressive results. Yang's southern border was broken through in one battle. Lingbei Prefecture was also broken through in a single day. Such results led Luo and Jing to make the decision to split up and attack, pushing Yang to the edge of cliff. If the Zhuang state could complete their strategy and directly penetrate the Yang state, then they wouldn't even need to break through the Heavenly Mandate residence. The restless powers in the vicinity would all rush over and devour this old beast. Yang also saw this point. Retired Emperor Han Yin, who had ignored politics for many years, broke out of seclusion and rushed to the Dragon Ceiling Pass alone, stopping Zhuang's advance. Afterwards, the various armies were mobilized to meet Zhuang Gaoxian at the Dragon Ceiling Pass. In this day and age, the Dragon Sealing Pass strategic significance was extremely important. It wasn't only because there was no way to defend this pass. It was a flat expanse of flatland. Once the pass was breached, the most fertile and softest hinterland of Yong would be exposed to the enemy. It was also because Han Yin was here. In the face of the Zhuang Kingdom's surprise attack, Han Yin had come alone to the Dragon Sealing Pass, displaying his keen insight into the situation, as well as his extraordinary courage. He had also, for the time being, blocked the vanguard of the Zhuang Kingdom's troops, proving that he was still the ruler of the Yong Kingdom who had turned the tide. But at the same time, he was putting himself in danger. Zhuang Gaoxian was also a Zhenren of the present age. Furthermore, he had stationed 300,000 soldiers in front of the Dragon Sealing Pass. Once he broke through the pass, he would have a great chance of killing Han Yin. On the other hand, Han Yin also made use of his position to lock the Zhuang country army under the Dragon Sealing Pass. Once the troops from all over the country gathered in front of the pass, they might be able to drive the Zhuang army back to the south of Qichang Mountain Range, or even attack Exan City. Night had already fallen, but the battlefield was filled with hanging lanterns, illuminating the dark night like it was daytime. The slaughter under the Dragon Sealing Pass didn't stop for a moment. The vast power of the army battered the pass again and again, causing the great formation of the Dragon Sealing Pass to tremble. Brilliant Taoist techniques intersected with splattering flesh and blood. Sabers, swords, and bones fiercely clashed. Every moment, a large number of soldiers died. On a temporarily erected high platform, Zhuang Gaoxian, dressed in luxurious clothes, overlooked the battlefield. Prime Minister Du Ruhui, Grand General Huangfu Duanming, Zhejiang Armor Commander Duan Li, and White Feather Army Commander Hibadeo all stood behind him. What do the ones surnamed Yao say? Is there still no movement? Zhuang Gaoxian asked casually. Du Ruhui shook his head. After Han Yin came out of seclusion, he cut off all contact with us. He shouldn't be rebelling anymore. Zhuang Gaoxian was neither sad nor happy. This is something that could be expected. The old bastard has accumulated his power for too long. These so-called dukes and marquises are even more obedient than dogs. That's right, Du Ruhui said. Without seeing blood, no one dares to make a move. I have to think of a way to make him bleed, Zhuang Gaoxian muttered to himself. At present, the Zhuang army situation was very good. However, the higher-ups on the platform all understood that the situation had already begun to change. The Zhuang army surprise attack had been planned for a long time and caught the enemy off guard. However, they hadn't achieved their complete strategic objective. Han Yin was too decisive. He dared to come to Yiyang Prefecture alone and unite his forces to defend the Dragon Sealing Pass. This was something that exceeded their expectations. If they couldn't take the Dragon Sealing Pass, they would sink into the quagmire of competing with Yang's resources. Step by step, they would walk towards defeat. Du Ruhui turned around and immediately disappeared from the high platform. The people on the platform didn't have any reaction. They were already used to this scene. After a while, Du Ruhui stepped out of the air and landed on the platform. His clothes were already stained with blood, but his expression was very calm. Of the 8 marquises of Yong, 2 have already entered the Dragon Sealing Pass. At least 3 are on the way. The Yong dukes and 8 marquises were all ascendant gods. The Marquis of Huaixiang, Yao Qi, was one of them. He was also the only marquis who had been moved by Du Ruhui's words. His attitude was ambiguous. However, Han Yin suddenly came out of seclusion and personally blocked the Zhuang army at the Dragon Sealing Pass, displaying his decisiveness and courage. Yao Qi immediately became resolute. The Zhuang only had Du Ruhui and Huangfu Duanming, 2 ascendant gods. At this moment, they relied on the advantage of having a large army to suppress the Dragon Sealing Pass. Once Yang's armies converged, the situation wouldn't be optimistic. Zhuang Gaoxian didn't show the slightest bit of worry. Instead, he lightly clapped his hands and praised. Han Yin broke out of seclusion and defended the city alone. He is truly a heroic ruler. Huangfu Duanming stood to the side with his crescent saber in hand. He stood there like a tall mountain, not saying a word. Although he was the highest commander of the Zhuang army, he rarely expressed his opinions in front of Du Ruhui and Zhuang Gaoxian, except for matters of war. Unlike his previous act of disagreeing with Du Ruhui, Huangfu Duanming was actually very respectful of Du Ruhui. "Who is that?" Zhuang Gaoxian suddenly asked. Everyone followed his line of sight and saw a general with a full beard standing in front of the left wall of the Dragon Ceiling Pass. He was exceptionally brave. Several times, he charged up the wall only to be knocked back down. However, he quickly charged up again, completely unafraid of death. His chi and blood soared to the heavens, gathering like smoke. He was clearly only in the soaring dragon realm, but he displayed the aura of an inner palace realm expert. Even in the midst of this magnificent army, he was still eye-catching. The Dragon Ceiling Pass's great formation was currently resisting the Zhuang army's formation. They could only choose to let these sporadic charging soldiers go. Huangfu Duanming glanced at him and raised his eyebrows, saying, "He's wearing the uniform of the Zheojiang Profound Armor." Duan Li immediately spoke, "Reporting to your Imperial Majesty, Grand General, this person is Du Yehu, a subordinate of the Zheojiang Profound Armor." "Correct." Zhuang Gaoxian nodded and didn't say anything else. However, everyone knew that this Du Yehu had already caught the eye of the king. If he didn't die in this battle, his future in the Zhuang army would be boundless. Chapter 682. Unlike the dark clouds in Xian and city and the bright night in front of the Dragon Ceiling Mountain Pass, Yong Country's Lingbei Prefecture was bathed in the pale moonlight. It wasn't to the extent that one couldn't see anything, but it was also difficult to see everything clearly. Of course, for transcendent cultivators, vision wasn't a problem that was difficult to solve. You're just a small and weak country. How dare you sneak into our borders? Just wait until Great Yong is free and we'll destroy you all. An old man with a long beard berated angrily. He held a green sword in his hand, causing green flames to surge as he fought against 3 opponents alone. He had the upper hand, even though he was fighting against 3 opponents alone. He was in a killing frenzy. His beard and hair danced in the wind as he pressed forward. The 3 Zhuang cultivators who surrounded him were forced to retreat. They relied on each other's support to not be defeated immediately. At this moment, the wind suddenly whistled. A giant green python scuttled from behind the old man. It opened its huge mouth, revealing its ferocious fangs. It came suddenly and swiftly, but the old man didn't overlook it. He turned around and swung his sword. His momentum was like a gust of wind as he counterattacked the green python. "Old man, don't be so arrogant. Look at who this is." A young cultivator with an inexperienced face placed the sword in his hand in front of a woman's neck. However, perhaps he wasn't used to threatening people, or perhaps he was taught these words by someone else. But the young cultivator's tone was stiff and his body was stiff. The woman whose neck was being held by his sword cried out, "Father!" The old man with a long beard had just repelled the green python. His body shook as he turned around. "Hong?" His voice trembled. "Where's On Ning and the rest?" He had already ordered his disciples to escape with his daughter. He had stayed behind to fight against the people of Zhuang. However, at this moment, he didn't dare to imagine and didn't want to believe. The woman named Hong was shocked and scared. She cried out, "On Ning and the rest were all killed." The young cultivator who was holding her hostage also seemed to be very nervous. He shouted stiffly, "Old man, quickly surrender. Otherwise, I'll... The old man's beard and hair trembled. He was unable to restrain his anger. "You bunch of shameless people. Do you only know how to threaten people with their families? Do you have any family? Do you have any conscience?" At this moment, the green python suddenly opened its mouth and a figure shot out like lightning. A light palm strike created the sound of waves. A huge wave appeared out of nowhere and immediately surrounded the old man. The old man raised his sword, but a stream of water wrapped around his wrist like a rope, preventing him from moving. The Tao energy in his body surged and was about to erupt. A hand entered the water and grabbed his neck, twisting it. The long-bearded old man immediately breathed his last. When he died, his eyes were still wide open, unwilling to close in peace. This assassin was clearly stronger than him, but he first sent people to surround him, then let them threaten him, and even hid himself to launch a sneak attack. How shameless! The stream of water dissipated, revealing a young cultivator with an elegant face and a calm expression. The long-bearded old man's corpse fell to the ground. Father, the woman named Hong, broke free from her restraints and threw herself onto the old man's corpse, crying bitterly. The elegant-looking young cultivator floated down and killed the woman with a casual palm strike. Her cries and screams were all drowned out. He raised his head and looked at the young cultivator. You can't even control a woman whose Tao energy has been crippled? Jiang Luiwei, are you going to return alive? Senior brother Lin. Jiang Luiwei lowered her head, somewhat fearful, but more than that, she felt the pain of an uneasy conscience. I don't think we should use his family. Senior brother Lin looked at her coldly. With such thoughts and attitude, it seems like I, Lin Zhengrun, should call you senior brother. Jiang Luiwei said anxiously, I just sympathy, compassion, a sense of justice. Lin Zhengrun recalled the green python with a flip of his hand and turned it into a long whip, wrapping it around his arm. He said coldly, in a battle between two armies, there's only victory and defeat. There's no good or evil. Your Tao points have been reset to 0 for this operation. If there's a next time, get lost. Although the Zhuang army had fought their way into Yiyang Prefecture and reached the Dragon Sealing Pass, they did not have complete control of the areas they passed through. The main force of the army attacked the Dragon Sealing Pass ferociously, while a large number of Tao Academy disciples spread out and swept through the entire Yiyang Prefecture and Lingbei Prefecture to eliminate the local resistance. Unlike the head-on clashes between armies, what the Tao Academy disciples faced were mostly small-scale battles. The Zhuang army surprise attack this time had been too sudden. Many forces in Lingbei Prefecture had been defeated before they could organize themselves. Now, many cultivators were scattered all over the place, putting up sporadic resistance. At the same time, the main forces of Zhuang and Yong were fighting at the Dragon Sealing Pass. In order to ensure the safety of their rear, they had to sweep away those obstacles and break down any resistance. That was what Lin Zhengrun was in charge of. At this moment, the 3 transcendental cultivators who had been attacking the long-bearded elder walked over and bowed to Lin Zhengrun. Seeing him reprimand Jiang Luiwei, they didn't dare to speak. The Green Flame Sword sect has been eliminated. Lin Zhengrun flipped through the booklet in his arms. According to the information, they seem to have an eldest disciple called Situ Jian. He should be a member of the Soaring Dragon sect. Haven't you seen him? One of the young cultivators said he should have already run away. Lin Zhengrun nodded. A mere member of the Soaring Dragon sect. So what if he ran away? He won't be able to cause any trouble. Let's go to the next place. At this point, he suddenly stopped and held a milky white bead. After calming down and sensing it for a while, he spoke again. There's a new order. What order? The same young cultivator asked. Lin Zhengrun was expressionless as he said mildly, drive away all the citizens of Lingbei Prefecture and have them attack the Dragon Sealing Pass. The cultivator's expressions froze, but no one dared to object. You should have done this long ago, Lin Zhengrun casually commented, then turned around. Get to work. Zhu Weiwa hadn't appeared on the battlefield. This was a great opportunity for him to plunder merit points and catch up to Zhu Weiwa. But he wasn't happy, because as smart as he was, he knew all too well what it meant. From start to finish, he didn't even look at Jiang Luiwei, nor did he ask if she was willing to carry out such a mission. His attitude was very clear. If she wasn't willing, then scram. Even if it seemed harder and harder to catch up to Zhu Weiwa, he wouldn't give up. He had to get all the merit points he could. No one, no matter what, could affect him. Zhu Weiwa had never known that Lin Zhengrun was so concerned about him. Or rather, he rarely paid attention to anyone. Lin Zhengrun was an exception. The sky was dark, and no stars could be seen. At this moment, The battlefield in Yongzhuang was in a state of chaos. But he was sitting on the tall city gate tower of Spearhead City, his spear resting on his knees in silence. Spearhead City was one of the 10 cities ceded by the Mo Kingdom to the Zhuang Kingdom, and it was also the front line between Zhuang and Mo. Duruhui had arranged for him to stay here. If there was a battle, it would be fine, but the problem was that the Grand Minister of the Arrest Department was hiding here. If any trouble really appeared, the Grand Minister would take care of it. With him here, there wouldn't be too much danger. This reflected many people's expectations of him, but it was precisely this deliberate safety that made him uncomfortable. He was Zhu Weiwa. When had he ever needed to be protected? Chapter 683. The moon was dark and the wind was cold above the tall city gate tower. The heavy clouds seemed like they were about to collapse. A tall, masked figure suddenly appeared behind Zhu Weiwa. A hoarse voice sounded from under the mask. "You want to go to the Yong battlefield?" The Grand Minister of the Zhuang country's arrest department had to wear a cast iron mask all year round, never showing his true face to others to show his impartiality. Zhu Weiwa didn't turn around. He continued to look at the Mo Kingdom hidden in the night across from the city. "I don't see the point in me staying here. His Majesty is taking an unprecedented gamble." The Grand Minister stood with his hands behind his back, similarly looking into the distance. "We not only have to consider victory, but also failure. This is the point of you staying here." Zhu Weiwa shook his head. "The reason the burning torch shines is definitely not because it doesn't dare to burn." He was the Grand Minister of the Arrest Department, one of the top 5 most powerful figures in the Zhuang country. If a National Academy disciple dared to question his words, he wouldn't have believed it in the past. But if this National Academy disciple was Zhu Weiwa, it was only natural. He was an extremely arrogant and flamboyant genius. "You are already bright enough, sharp enough," the Grand Minister said meaningfully. "Zhu Weiwa, Prime Minister Du believes that you can shoulder the future of the Zhuang country. I also believe so. But before that, you need to learn blade concealment." Zhu Weiwa pursed his lips and didn't speak. And in the distant night sky, a figure was flying rapidly towards Zhuang country. The wind that blew past Zhuang country might have also blown past Exen. On the cold and lonely streets of Exen, the battle was still ongoing. The branches brandishing their claws and fangs were like scenes from the past. That day in the Zhuang country's Dao Academy, Jiang Wang was attacked by the White Bone Path. Dong A stood up for his disciple and directly used this unique Taoist technique, leaving the 2 demons with nowhere to hide. He killed one on the spot and forced the other to die. The Jasper Cage could be said to have awakened Jiang Wang's yearning for the wood path. It was also an unforgettable scene for Jiang Wang on his journey. The Taoist technique was still the same Taoist technique, and the person was still the same person. But Jiang Wang had already turned from a bystander to a combatant. He had once been protected by this Tao technique. Now he was sealed by this Tao technique. Life was like a giant joke. Time shifted, and so did the realms. The Jasper Cage covered the long street, and the ruler of 2 boundaries blocked the bright moon. Jiang Wang's sword couldn't advance an inch in front of the Iron Ruler. The Jasper Cage repelled all other elemental energy, and the sea of flame flowers was extinguished as soon as it spread out. As for the competition for wood elemental energy, he was far inferior to Dong. Dong, it was the most adept at controlling fine essence energy. Back then, Jiang Wang's cultivation was slow, and he was stuck in the process of laying his foundation. It was Dong who taught him the energy control formula. As a result, he was able to complete the foundation-laying process faster and not be stuck in front of the heavenly cycle star formation for too long. But at this moment, Jiang Wang only felt anger. All of his emotions, all of his hatred, were contained in this sword of longing. Dong clearly knew why he had come, but she actually dared to interrogate him about whether it was correct. Could it be that becoming the vice prime minister of the Zhuang country represented the correct path? Could it be that holding the dual boundary ruler that punishes evils and sins is equivalent to justice itself? Jiang Wang hated Dong for being an accomplice and for ignoring the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in Maplewood City. And he was angry because Dong didn't seem to take this matter to heart at all. It was as if she didn't think that she was wrong at all. His Tao essence burned wildly. His right hand held the Sauvignon longing. His left hand pressed back with extreme determination, and a ball of grayish-white, decaying light appeared. It was the Inner Mansion Realm's rotten wood formula. The reason why he had sneaked into Wangjiang City and forcefully obtained the rotten wood formula from Wangjiang City's Tao Academy was to deal with Dong in the future. But because of the sudden change in the situation, this battle had been brought forward to tonight. Even if he had to give up 2 Tao techniques in exchange, he couldn't deny the fact that he had taken it by force. That was why he felt ashamed when facing Fu Baosong. That wasn't something he would do. It was only because his hatred for Dong had suppressed his personal morals. He wanted to kill Dong so badly that he was going crazy. The rotten and wood formula was undoubtedly the nemesis of wood elemental techniques. It was one of the gifts that he had specially prepared for Dong. It would also be ignited at Dong funeral tonight. The grayish-white ball of light exploded in the air. Like a swallow returning to the forest, it pounced on the rapidly approaching jade cage and entangled it deeply. As a result, the branches and leaves rotted, and the trees rotted. The air emitted a nauseating rotten smell. The grayish-white, decaying light quickly expelled the vibrant jade color. The jade cage that covered the long street had already decayed, withered, and collapsed in a breath's time. It was as if it had never appeared. The rotten wood formula instantly cleared Dong's control over the wood elemental energy in this area. Jiang Wang took advantage of the void and completed his invasion of the wood elemental energy. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the thorn crown on his head flashed and disappeared. His left hand flipped back. A new Tao technique had been formed. 5 Qi Binding Tiger. The power of the Tao technique, with the support of the thorn crown, began to stir the 5 Qi in Dong's body. However, through the power of the Tao technique, he could clearly feel that Dong's body was like a towering tree. It was firmly rooted in the ground, and the 5 Qi in her body couldn't be shaken at all. Jiang Wang's 5 Qi Binding Tiger was like falling into a quagmire. It couldn't even bind Dong off her breath. On the other hand, Dong slapped back. A ferocious green python roared out and collided with the pitch-black chains that drilled out of the void, sending them flying. The chains nimbly flipped and bound the green python. They directly wrapped around the green python and collapsed into Tao elemental energy. However, another green python rushed forward and knocked it away again. This repeated for a total of 9 times. Jiang Wang's chains were knocked out of his detection range and disappeared. Dong flipped the double world ruler and took 3 steps back. Each step covered a distance of 3 feet. With every step he took back, a jade-like tree rose from the ground in front of him. After taking 3 steps back, 3 trees rose in succession. These 3 jade-like trees formed a tripartite formation. As soon as they appeared, they had already suppressed their elemental energy, sealed their aura, and faintly emitted a jade-like glow. A strong sense of danger exploded in his heart. Dong's control over the wood elemental energy had almost reached perfection. In terms of attainments in the wood elemental energy alone, he had already surpassed any cultivator of the same level that Jiang Wang had seen so far. Jiang Wang had once studied under him and received his guidance. He knew that he was strong, but he did not know that he was so tyrannical. The reason why Dong could become the vice minister of Zhuang country and be regarded as Du Ruhui's successor was definitely not just because he participated in the sacrifice of Maplewood City. However, Jiang Wang had already made the greatest guess about Dong's strength. He never dared to be careless with Dong. The rotten wood technique that he had deduced to the inner mansion level was one of his meticulous preparations. Jiang Wang leaned forward with his sword. He held the rotten wood technique in his hand and struck 3 times in a row. He had already passed by the jade-like trees, and the decaying power of the rotten wood technique had already penetrated the 3 jade-like trees. This Dao technique was actually Dong Ah's trump card that he had never revealed in front of others. It was called the Three-Life Jade Tree. It was used to suppress dissatisfaction and erase emotions. Its performance was indeed better than the Jade Cage. It was not completely occupied by the grayish-white color. However, it was also fixed on the spot, and its power was stopped. Jiang Wang once again wielded his sword in front of Dong Ah and faced him head-on. Behind him, crack, crack. The jade-like trees shattered like colored glass and fell to the ground with flowing light. P.S. I can foresee that I will have to run around naked again for a few months. This volume is about to end. If you have conditions, try your best to support the official subscription on the Chidian app. How much is a chapter? It takes me half a day to write. Chapter 684. In the past, the master and disciple had fought to the death. The ever-changing Dao techniques dissected each other, dazzling everyone's eyes. Dong A was the deputy minister of country, and Du Ruhui had high hopes for his future. Jiang Wang, on the other hand, was Qian Jiaoqi. He struggled alone in the world with his sword. Both sides were evenly matched in this battle. Life and death were decided in an instant. Years of sweat, superhuman decisiveness, talent in battle. There were many factors that determined the outcome, but Jiang Wang only saw life and death. He wanted Dong dead. The rotten wood technique, which had been deduced to the inner mansion level, was extremely effective against wood elemental Dao techniques of the same level. The Three Lives Jade Tree was destroyed before it could show its true effect. At this moment, Jiang Wang stepped on the flowing light on the ground. His sword moved forward like the setting sun. A tragic and stirring momentum assaulted Dong A's senses. It made him realize that this was a Dao technique that was truly honed on the battlefield. The young man in front of him had gone through countless life and death situations in order to stand in front of him. He had truly fought with his life on the line. Once the sword was unsheathed, there was no turning back. This sword was an old general past his prime. He had poured a lifetime of glory into this sword. It came so decisively and so quickly. It went straight for his throat. Dong A raised his right arm to block, and the green light faintly surged. Swoosh! The sword light flashed. Half of his arm was directly chopped off. As soon as the bright red blood appeared, it was blocked by the rapidly growing granulation. The endless growth divine ability came into play. Dong A's fist was regenerated almost out of thin air. Before Jiang Wang could withdraw his sword, a punch landed on his face. Bam! Jiang Wang was sent flying backward, spitting blood. Dong A stepped on the ground. Two vines suddenly appeared, intertwined, and lashed out from below. The vines boosted his absolute speed. Dong A's body was like an arrow released from a bow. He directly caught up with Jiang Wang, who was flying backward. An extremely vicious elbow strike landed on his abdomen. Jiang Wang curled up in midair. His internal organs were all displaced. For a moment, he saw stars and began to hallucinate. His mind gently floated, as if he could see the beautiful phoenix lanterns dancing in the dark sky. Jiang Anan was sitting in one of the lanterns, extremely happy. In Yunqing, Jiang Anan was giggling. She was cheering for the bustling New Year's Eve. She was a child, bright and innocent. Jiang Wang of Exen and City was fighting a bloody battle. Life has two faces. I'm here because I'm there for you. Jiang Wang regained his composure and recovered from the dizziness. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Dong A's arm. His grip was so strong that his fingers were almost embedded into Dong A's arm muscles. The Tong Tian Palace and the inner mansion rumbled as they operated. Even the heaven and earth isolated island shook as Dao essence surged. Totem power blessing. The Starfire secret manual had been opened. He opened his mouth and spat. True, Samadhi fire. A raging flame directly pounced on Dong A's face. This fire was imbued with the essence, energy, and spirit, and could burn anything. Dong A's eyes, mouth, and nose were instantly melted by the true Samadhi fire. Intense pain assaulted his face, but he didn't even make a sound. He directly raised the double-world ruler and cut it from the bottom up. Using the iron ruler as a short knife, he directly cut off half of his own head. So decisive, the half of his head that was tainted by the true Samadhi fire was cut off by the double-world ruler and flew far away. Dong Ai's face once again grew ears and nose. He suddenly lowered his head. With a headbutt, Jiang Wang was knocked back. Before Jiang Wang was knocked away, he firmly grabbed Jiang Wang with both arms and pulled him back. It was another headbutt. Bang! Jiang Wang's forehead was already bleeding. Dong Ai wanted to rely on his endless divine power to exchange injury for injury and exhaust Jiang Wang to death here. Jiang Yan. Jiang Wang roared in the Tong Tian Palace. They shared the same body. Life and death were the same. When the physical body died, no one could survive. Jiang Yan could no longer watch from the sidelines. At this moment of life and death, the black candle leaped out of Jiang Wang's Tong Tian Palace and directly crashed into Dong Ai under his control. Controlling the candle, he activated the power of the soul and directly attacked Dong Ai's soul. Back in the battlefield of Qiyang, he blocked Ji Chung like this. At this moment, a small seal on Dong Ai's waist suddenly shone brightly. The sounds of hawking, quarreling, children crying, toasting, and military drills. The sounds of all kinds of people in the world. Minister Zhuang's seal. When Du Ruhui left, he left the seal with Dong Ai to help him guard the rear. As soon as the seal appeared, Jiang Yin let out a scream and directly died. The candle was knocked back to the Tong Tian Palace the same way it came. The seal also dimmed. Did Jiang Yin faint from the injury, or was he completely destroyed? This was a very important question that concerned the future. However, Jiang Wang didn't have time to think too much. With a thought, a total of 300 soul snakes had already entered Dong Ai's Tong Tian Palace and reopened the soul battlefield. Inside Dong Ai's Tong Tian Palace, a large tree supported the palace. Densely packed black snakes drilled into the tree like vermin. Suddenly, the tree shook and its branches swung like whips, whipping all the snakes away. Jiang Wang directly cut off the connection with the soul snakes. Enduring the great damage to his soul, he allowed the snakes to cause trouble in Dong Ai's Tong Tian Palace. In reality, he suddenly raised his knee and pushed Dong Ai back a little. The moment he broke free, sword light suddenly flashed. His body was like duckweed, but he didn't forget to resist. The body was not controlled by the sword. Dong Ai's arms were cut off, but they quickly grew out again. However, two Jiang Wang appeared in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. They also wielded their swords. Red makeup mirror image. Dong Ai directly opened his arms and grabbed at the two Jiang Wang. Because of the endless divine ability, he didn't need to guard his vitals and didn't need to worry about being injured. The black snakes that broke into the Tong Tian Palace had already been suppressed. As long as he used the same trick and caught Jiang Wang, he could use the divine ability to exhaust him to death. This was a way to win if he fought steadily and surely. He grabbed with his left arm, but he already missed. It was an illusion. Just as this thought flashed through Dong Ai's mind, the Jiang Wang on the right had already swept his sword across in an extremely elegant and unrestrained manner. A famed scholar in dire straits was still outstanding. This was the sword of a famed scholar in dire straits, elegant and fierce. Dong Ai's right arm was directly cut off. Tonight, his arm had already been cut off many times, but it was also regenerating like before. The speed wasn't as fast as before, but it was still completed in a breath's time. The endless divine ability was simply incomprehensible and terrifying. Ordinary outer sect cultivators couldn't easily kill him. But just before Dong Ai's right arm regenerated, Jiang Wang's entire body had already crashed into him. With a horizontal slash of his sword, he cut off Dong Ai's legs. At the same time, he used his left hand to directly press Dong Ai's upper body to the ground. Dong Ai activated his divine ability. As he grabbed Jiang Wang, his legs had already regenerated. With the endless divine ability, even if he was cut into a human stick, it would only be a tragic scene for a short while. Close combat was exactly what he wanted, but Jiang Wang flipped his palm and slapped out a long nail. The nail was dark and gloomy. It slammed into Dong A's left leg and sank into his flesh. Dong A's left leg was already halfway through regenerating under the effects of the endless divine ability when it suddenly stopped. Jiang Wang had asked Lin Ke to make these nails for him using the swallow owl's beak that he had obtained from the forest ocean origin realm as raw material. There were 6 nails in each set. Back in the forest ocean origin realm, the 7 viridescent trees also possessed powerful vitality and astonishing regenerative abilities. However, his regenerative abilities had been completely nullified by the swallow owl's beak, and he had died on the spot. When it had split the spoils of war in the swallow's nest, Jiang Wang had purposely chosen the swallow owl's beak for Dong A. The name of this set of nails was Slaughter. It was the endless divine ability that was specifically designed to kill Dong A. Dong A's right hand was still reaching out when it was sliced off by a sword strike. Immediately afterwards, a slaughter nail was nailed into it. Dong A's right hand stopped regenerating. Then came his left hand, then his right leg. Jiang Wang continued to attack. 6 death spikes pierced into Dong A's arms, legs, chest, and the last one pierced between her eyebrows. Chapter 685. The jubilant atmosphere in Yunqing continued. Phoenix lanterns floated in the night sky. There was supposed to be rain tonight, but it was also dispersed by the cultivators of Lingxiao Pavilion. Jiang Anan grabbed Yi Qingyu's hand and jumped to the market. She played with the Phoenix lanterns tonight, floated over the entire Yunqing, ate a lot of delicious food, and was very happy. Sister Qingyu, look at this. Little Anan pointed to a jade pendant on a roadside stall. It was oval, pure white, and engraved with auspicious cloud patterns. It was really delicate. Is it beautiful? Yi Qingyu nodded seriously. Anan has good taste. Jiang Anan grinned, turned her head, and said to the stall owner obediently, "Can I see this jade?" The stall owner was a white-haired old woman. Hearing this, she handed the jade pendant with a smile. "Of course, little beauty." Jiang Anan turned her head a little embarrassedly, holding the white jade, and whispered to Yi Qingyu, "Sister, do you think my brother looks good wearing this jade?" Her voice was very low, as if she was afraid that someone would rob her of it. Yi Qingyu thought for a moment. When she first saw Jiang Wang on Yuheng Peak, he seemed to be wearing a jade pendant on his waist. Later, when they met again, she didn't see it. "It looks good," she said. "Then I'll buy this." Jiang Anan was happy. Seeing her fumbling for money in the squirrel box, Yi Qingyu also smiled. "This is the New Year's gift you bought for your brother." Jiang Anan counted the taels of silver and muttered to himself as he nodded vigorously. "Then where did you get the money to buy your brother a New Year's gift?" Yi Qingyu deliberately teased her. "My brother gave it to me." Jiang Anan answered crisply. She didn't think there was anything wrong with using her brother's money to buy a gift for her brother. She even turned her head and bargained with the stall owner. "Grandma, I want to buy this. Can you give me a cheaper price?" Yi Qingyu couldn't help but cover her face. This silly girl, she hasn't even started to quote. The old woman smiled, and her wrinkles piled together. "I'll give you the cheapest one." After paying the bill and receiving the jade pendant, little Ann's eyes curved into crescents. She placed the piece of jade into the squirrel box like it was a treasure, then obediently held Yi Qingyu's hand and said happily, "Sister Qingyu, let's go find my brother." That soft little hand brought a kind of warmth in the cold night. In the bustling market, Yi Qingyu lowered her head and saw the stars, sparkling, all in her eyes. At this moment, Yi Qingyu understood Jiang Wang's love for Jiang Anan all too well. Who wouldn't love Jiang Anan? Her heart was pure like glass, and there were stars in her eyes. The bright moon that shone on Yun City did not shine on Xinan City tonight. The dark clouds made the bright moon feel ashamed. Under the clouds, the fighting beasts were still fighting. Life and death had always been the eternal divide. Dong did not give up any chance to resist. Even if he only had one arm and one leg left, he was still fighting. Even if he was using his head to smash and his teeth to bite, he was still fighting. I tried my best. He asked himself if he had done his best. He was worthy of his official position, worthy of the burden on his shoulders, worthy of all the choices he had made along the way. After all 6 killing nails were nailed and his limbs were cut off, he finally could not move anymore. He was nailed to the ground and knew that he no longer had a chance. His reaction was very calm. There was no fear or despair. It was as if it was late in the cold night, as if he was just about to fall asleep, and he accepted the fact that he fell asleep. In this battle that took place on the street of Xianan City, Dong, A, and Jiang Wang deliberately controlled the scope of the battle. They did not even affect the common people on both sides of the street. They were silent throughout the whole battle. Only at the very beginning did they greet each other. "Teacher, long time no see." "Yes, it's been a long time." Only this sentence was exchanged. Except for themselves, probably no one could know their feelings. In this battle that took place in Xianan City, no matter how tragic the situation was, no matter how serious the injuries were, the two people fighting did not even groan in pain. Silent confrontation, silent fighting, silent suffering, silent endurance. This pair of former teacher and disciple seemed to have the same tenacity and stubbornness. Even at this moment, when Dong A's limbs were cut off and his endless supernatural power was nailed to death by the killing nails, he did not make a sound. He only felt the cold aura coming from the 6 long nails, felt the seed of supernatural power in his body trying again and again, and felt his blood flowing out uncontrollably. The feeling of life slowly flowing away was clear and concrete for the first time. He looked at Jiang Wang quietly and guessed what kind of effort this student had put in to get this set of long nails and what kind of story he had experienced. "It seems that I have missed out on a lot," he thought. Jiang Wang knelt on Dong A's body and restrained his movements. At the same time, he looked at him silently. Jiang Wang could not see any emotions in Dong A's eyes, other than his eyelids twitching unconsciously. It could also mean that he was not completely unable to feel physical pain. This was very good. He could feel pain, even if it was only in his body. This was very good. Jiang Wang silently turned his long sword back and slowly moved it towards Dong A's neck. This process was very slow, but there was no pause. Dong A's gaze followed the movement of this sword. He clearly knew that death was approaching. He approached firmly. "What is the name of this sword?" He opened his mouth and asked. Jiang Wang held the long sword horizontally so that he could see the 3 words "Swallow returns to nest" inscription on the sword. "Its name is Sauvignon Yearning. Looking at all the eaves, there is not a single spring swallow that flies back to its nest. Wandering in the old city, crying in the air, the 4 seasons are over, the cold and heat are gone. The sword's name is Sauvignon Yearning. The sword's name is Swallow Returns to Nest. This sword, this emotion, this heart." Dong A withdrew his gaze. "I understand," he said. In that instant, there was a very complicated expression in his eyes, but it was only a flash. The sky was dark and heavy. The rain was about to fall. Sauvignon Yearning slowly approached and finally laid across Dong A's neck. Jiang Wang looked at his firm eyes and asked, "Don't you have anything to explain?" Dong A laughed. His serious face was unexpectedly impudent when he laughed. He laughed arrogantly. "Kid, keep working hard. You're not qualified to ask me for an explanation now." This was the first time Jiang Wang saw this person laugh. It was also the last time. With a pull of the long sword, a head was cut off. In Dong A's body, the Tongtian Palace disintegrated, and the 3 inner residences collapsed one after another. The muffled sounds were like the sound of firecrackers welcoming the new year. Even the jade-green supernatural power seed in the 2nd inner residence dissipated. His vitality was extinguished. On New Year's Eve of the year 3918 of the Taoist calendar, Dong A was beheaded in the capital of Zhuang Country, Xian City. Rumble. Lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder exploded. In the dark and heavy sky, the heavy rain that had been brewing for a long time finally fell. Jiang Wang still maintained the posture of kneeling and pressing Dong A down. One by one, he pulled out the killing nails and put them away. His movements were slow and serious. Dong, it was dead. Dong, it was truly dead. Jiang Wang looked up at the sky. The raindrops all over the sky were falling toward him. This was New Year's Eve of the year 3918 of the Taoist calendar. Because it was raining and the rain was too heavy, Jiang Wang couldn't tell if he was crying or not. Originally, I wanted this to be the ending because this was the scene I wanted to freeze. In the opening chapter of The Good Night, Jiang Wang left Yun City and walked down the cloud stairs, leaving only his back to the world. And, in Yi Qingyu's arms, stepped on the cloud ladder and walked up to the sky. At that time, I thought of the scene today. One in Yun City, one in laughter, one in sorrow. This was Jiang Wang's choice, and also Jiang Wang's responsibility. I've revised this chapter many times. Every revision is good, but I want the best. In the end, I presented it to everyone. This is the importance of having a stockpile of manuscripts. Without a stockpile of manuscripts, I could only make adjustments. The ending here was also very good. It was full of emotions, and it was also in line with my personal aesthetics. But considering the overall layout, I sat idly for a whole day and had a better choice. So, let's continue the story. Chapter 686, Luring Spear City. In the sky where the north wind was blowing, a thin figure was flying over at high speed. The people on the city gate tower had already noticed him. Zhu Weiwa was still sitting upright with his spear across his knees, looking straight ahead. The Grand Minister of the Arrest Department turned around and welcomed the person. "Why are you here?" His voice came from under the mask. It was a cold reply. Li Jianxiu's face gradually became clearer under the night sky. He flew up the tower and bowed seriously. "Greetings, Grand Minister." He then greeted Zhu Weiwa. "Greetings, Senior Marshal Brother Zhu." Zhu Weiwa only raised his hand to stop him, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. Li Jianxiu was already used to Zhu Weiwa's personality, so he didn't mind. He took out a black square token and presented it to the Grand Minister of the Arrest Department with both hands. "Prime Minister Du ordered me to send this token over, saying that you know what to do." The Grand Minister's voice was a little confused. He reached out his hand to take the black square token. Did he say anything else? Li Jianxiu thought for a while. He only said that the military situation was urgent and asked me to send it over as soon as possible. The black square token was now in his hand. Just as it touched his palm, before he could take a closer look, it disintegrated silently, turning into a handful of black fragments that fell with the wind. The Grand Minister was silent for a while. Then he closed his hand and held the last fragment of the square token in his palm. "Prime Minister Du sacrificed himself," he said. Li Jianxiu was stunned. Zhu Weiwa grabbed the spear and flew up from the city gate tower. His voice was as sharp as a spear. "I'm going back to XNN." The tip of the spear ignited a flame that immediately covered his entire body. Like a shooting star, he flew across the southern border of Zhuang, in front of the Dragon Sealing Pass. On the high platform built by the Zhuang army, Du Ruhui, who was discussing the war situation with Zhuang Gaoxian, suddenly fell silent. Zhuang Gaoxian glanced at him and saw a small seal slowly forming on his waist. The seal of Zhuang. It was supposed to be on Deputy Prime Minister Dong, who was in charge of Xianan City, to help him stabilize the rear. Now that it was on Du Ruhui, it could only mean one thing. Dong was dead. The Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Zhuang's capital was dead. Leaving aside the emotional part, just considering the situation. This was bad news that couldn't get any worse. How bad was the rear? Was there any way to turn back? "Teacher, you can't go back," Zhuang Gaoxian said. He couldn't determine how Dong died, and he didn't know the current situation in Xianan City. It was very likely that this was a trap. If Du Ruhui used his divine ability to return, once he was trapped on the spot, he wouldn't be able to fight this kingdom war anymore. To Zhuang Jun, Du Ruhui, who had top-notch divine abilities, was definitely an indispensable core combat power. His divine arts were enough to allow him to advance and retreat freely most of the time, but the prerequisite was that he could not be led by the nose. With Du Ruhui's intelligence, It was impossible for him not to understand this logic. So he only said, "There's no time. We can't wait anymore." They had planned for this kingdom war for many years and had deduced countless scenarios. Naturally, they had prepared many backup plans. It was just that most of those backups needed time to activate. For example, there were spies from the Zhuang state within the Yong army that had rushed over to rescue the emperor. These spies were capable of rebelling in the heat of battle. For example, Yao Qi, a marquis of Yong who was dissatisfied with Han Yin, might have a chance to fight for it. At the very least, when the battle was in a stalemate or when they had the upper hand, they would have a great chance. For example, but now, Dong A, who was overseeing the rear, was dead. They had already lost time. Time was no longer on their side. Instead, it was on Han Yin's side. This was because at this moment, they were completely unaware of the current situation in Xian City. Du Ruhui possessed the top-notch divine ability, so close, yet worlds apart. Even so, he did not dare to rashly return to take a look. The responsibility he had inherited was too great. He could not afford to take any risks outside of the Zhuang state's battlefield. Once the news of the vice minister's death spread, it would deal a devastating blow to the morale of the Zhuang state's army. If the murderer was an expert sent by the Yong state, then they would definitely rush to make this matter public. Zhuang Jun did not have time to hesitate. Du Ruhui and Zhuang Gaoxian could see it clearly. No matter what happened within the Zhuang state, even if the worst-case scenario happened, the Mo state and Cheng state would join forces to attack Xian City and destroy the rear of the Zhuang state's army, preventing any news from spreading out of Xian City. As long as they took down the Dragon Sealing Mountain Pass, they would still have room for strategy. With an army of 300,000 gathered together, they could occupy the Destiny residence and establish a state on the spot. Taking down the Dragon Sealing Mountain Pass had always been their firm strategic goal. At this point in time, it had become the only choice. It was a choice of life and death. Zhuang Gaoxian's gaze swept across the battlefield. He glanced at Du Ruhui, Huangfu Duanming, Duan Li, and Hibadeo. At this moment, among the 300,000 soldiers of the Zhuang state, only they knew that something had happened in Xian City. Everyone's expression was solemn, but none of them cowered. These were his civil and military officials. They were the sword in his hand, the blade to kill the enemy. The iron ruler named Dong A had been broken, but the remaining people would still resolutely rush toward the future. They would rush toward a rising and glorious era. Come, let's forget all our preparations and all our backup plans. Let us give up all our illusions and hopes. Let us not care about the outcome of the Navy. Let us not care about whether the Jing state can destroy Xian. We only have ourselves. The Zhuang state only has us. In front of the Dragon Sealing Mountain Pass, there is only Zhuang state and Yong state. This is the grudge between the Zhuang state and the Yong state that has lasted for hundreds of years. This is a battle of life and death between the Zhuang state and the Yong state. Between the Zhuang state and the Yong state, one of them will perish in this battle. And I believe that the Zhuang state will not perish. Zhuang Gaoxian changed his temperament of a wealthy man. He was domineering and unrestrained, brash and wild. Du Ruhui, listen to my orders. Du Ruhui knelt in front of him. At this moment, there was no teacher or student, only a ruler and his subject. Your subject is here. I order you to wander around the Yong state, destroy all the joints, and paralyze the Yong state. If you are intercepted, I order you to pin down as many gods as possible. Your subordinate listens to your orders. Du Ruhui stood up. He was filled with killing intent. He took a step and left. Huangfu Duanming, listen to my orders. Your subject is here. I order you to lead the army and launch a strong attack to pressure the Yong army. The breakthrough is tonight. If the Marquis of Yong comes out of seclusion to fight, you must kill him. Huangfu Duanming gripped his guandao tightly and replied loudly, "This general obeys." He wiped his guandao, and blood gushed out from his palm. He swore on the spot, "In this battle, I will either fold my blade in front of the pass or stand on the city gate tower." Duan Li, Hibadeo, listen to my orders. Duan Li and Hibadeo knelt in unison. Your subject is here. I order the two of you to mobilize the Zhejiang Profound Armor and the White Feather Army to stop the Marquis of Yong as much as possible, regardless of the casualties. Clear the obstacles between me and Han Yin. The two of them did not hesitate and replied in unison. This general obeys. We are willing to die for your majesty. Only then did Zhuang Gaoxian flick his sleeves and turn to face the towering dragon ceiling pass. It was as if he was looking directly at the monarch of Yong who had held power for hundreds of years. Hasn't Han Yin been looking for a chance to kill me? I'll give him a chance. Let's see. In today's domain, it's actually someone's world. P.S. The ending I mentioned yesterday was the ending of the hero's scroll, not the entire Red Heart. I did have many thoughts of giving up, but in the end, they were all defeated by my passion. I won't give up. I still have my savings and my spirit. If I really can't hold on, I'll tell everyone in advance. I won't leave without saying goodbye. I'm very ceremonial. Chapter 687. Torrential rain poured down. The hurried sound of the rain made the night even colder. The weak had to use all their strength to fight against the strong. The Zhuang kingdom had no right to hold back. Therefore, the entire Exant and city was unprecedentedly weak. They didn't even have enough soldiers to maintain the basic law and order. The battle that happened on the streets of the Zhuang kingdom's capital lasted for a long time, but no one came. The heavy rain kept hitting the long street. This heavy accusation lasted for a long time. Only then did people come out from the houses on both sides of the street, trembling with fear, to observe the situation. Naturally, they could only see a corpse that was dismembered into 6 parts. The corpse of the vice minister of the Zhuang kingdom, Dong A. When Jiang Wang attacked, he only wanted to kill Dong completely. However, in reality, he caused such a cruel death. The soldiers who received the report came to seal off the scene. After identifying the corpse, they almost fainted. The officials who were sent away to rest by Dong A gathered at the Mandarin Pavilion one after another. However, they couldn't come up with a plan for a long time, until Zhu Weiwa, who was wrapped in flames, broke through the curtain of rain and flew over from the border of Luring Spear City. Zhu Weiwa probably never regarded Lin Zhengrun as an opponent. Ever since he went to Wangjiang City alone and Lin Zhengrun refused to fight, this name was thrown to the back of his mind. Later, he lent a gun to Jiang Wang and even told him that if Lin Zhengrun dared to bully others with his cultivation, he would beat him up every time he saw him. It could be said that he despised Lin Zhengrun to the extreme, and Lin Zhengrun really swallowed his anger and never fought head-on. However, in Lin Zhengrun's heart, the only opponent he really cared about was Zhu Weiwa. Of course, now he probably had to add the man wearing a mountain ghost mask who broke into the Lin clan's territory at night. The Zhuang kingdom went all out to fight this time and mobilized almost all the forces that could fight. However, the higher-ups left Zhu Weiwa alone in the country. This self-evident expectation made Lin Zhengrun feel pressured. He knew very well that in the hearts of the higher-ups of the Zhuang kingdom, Zhu Weiwa's weight had already surpassed all the young geniuses. He was obviously regarded as the future core. However, Lin Zhengrun would never give up. This battle with Zhuang Yong was a good opportunity. Of course, the higher-ups of the Zhuang kingdom had placed their expectations on Zhu Weiwa. To a certain extent, the higher-ups of the Zhuang kingdom treated him as a retreat and future seed. However, this also meant that he would not be able to accomplish anything on Zhuang Yong's battlefield. In this very crucial battle, if he could perform brilliantly and obtain enough merit points, he might be able to catch up from behind. It was with this idea that Lin Zhengrun did not allow anyone to affect his actions. Leading men to sweep through the Yong kingdom's Lingbei prefecture and driving the populace to the Dragon Ceiling Pass was not a complicated matter. One only needed to be ruthless, and he did it very well. At this moment, Lin Zhengrun stopped in the air and bowed to a red-faced old man who had hurried over. For Lord Chancellor to suddenly come here, Do you have any urgent military news to announce? This red-faced old man was the State Academy's wine chancellor, Zhang Ren. The head of the National Academy had always been the Minister of State, but the Minister of State did not have the extra energy to manage the specific affairs of the National Academy. In reality, the principal of the State Academy was actually the Chancellor. Lin Zhengren was naturally very familiar with Zhang Ren. The young commoners, who had been driven away, formed a long line at the foot of their feet, advancing forward without stopping. Every once in a while, someone would raise a torch. Naturally, the Zhuang state would not provide hanging lanterns for the people who had been driven away. Their final stop was in front of the Yiyang Prefecture's Dragon Sealing Pass. However, it seemed that they would not be able to make it in time. The situation had changed too quickly and too violently. Zhang Ren lowered his head and glanced. Suddenly, he asked, Lin Zhengren, how do you think driving away these commoners will be effective? For a moment, Lin Zhengren could not fathom his thoughts. Cautiously, he replied, don't the resources that the sirs have distributed already explain their intentions? Zhang Ren did not bat an eyelid. Speak. The Chancellor's question could not be ignored. Thinking it over, Lin Zhengren answered truthfully, I saw that the rear army had prepared many broken pattern talismans. It can be seen that the higher-ups already have an idea. When the time comes, we will drive away these young commoners to attack the city and have them advance with broken pattern talismans. If they destroy a formation pattern, they will be able to retreat and avoid death. If Han Yin orders them to be executed, he will certainly lose the popular will. If they are ignored, the Dragon Sealing Pass's great formation will certainly be broken. Zhang Ren sighed. If we use this method to attack the city, even if we win, it will be difficult for the popular will to accept it. Lord Chancellor is correct. Lin Zhengren very cautiously considered his tone. However, I am afraid that we cannot care so much right now. Victory is most important. As for the popular will, it is the easiest to fool. It can be slowly nurtured. Zhang Ren gave him a meaningful glance. You are a talent. Although Lin Zhengren had interacted with Zhang Ren quite a few times, this kind of person never revealed his likes and dislikes. His true personality was hard to fathom. Lin Zhengren himself was not confident that his answer would satisfy Zhang Ren. As a result, he only replied modestly, Lord Chancellor overpraises me. I do have a mission for you. Zhang Ren gently broached the topic, as if he really was just asking casually. Changing the subject, he said, some unforeseen events have occurred in Exine City. I'm still not clear on the specifics, so I need to select a few quick-witted National Academy disciples to go back and take a look. If there is any situation, report back immediately. He looked at Lin Zhengren. I see that you are very smart and very suitable for this mission. Lin Zhengren's face was expressionless, making it impossible for others to discern his true emotions. Hearing this, he only cupped his hands in greeting. I'm indebted to Lord Chancellor for thinking so highly of me. Zhang Ren will naturally accept the order. However, the matter of the Lingbei Prefecture, you don't have to worry about this. I will find someone to take over. Zhang Ren patted his shoulder. Just take care of this matter. I understand. Lin Zhengren bowed and received the order. As he turned around, a ruthless look flashed across his eyes. Unforeseen events have occurred in Exine City. The state minister doesn't even know what happened there, but he want me to go? Does he think that I am not dying fast enough? He sneered in his heart, but he did not show it on his face. This was because he did not have the right to reject the State Academy's chancellor. Lin Zhengren had always been a very clear-headed person. In his own judgment system, he would never take risks that he could not take, and he would never do things that he should not do. Even his dissatisfaction with Zhang Ren was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. He only left behind more important information and judgments. Zhang Ren had probably been the chancellor for too long and had forgotten the cruelty of the world. Now, he probably valued kind-hearted people more. If he interacted with them again in the future, he would have to adjust his behavior. Thinking about various things, Lin Zhengren still stepped on the road back to Zhuang country. From the Lingbei Prefecture back to Exine City, the entire journey was under the control of the Zhuang country's army. Even if it was just for show, he could not delay too much and let his fellow apprentices, who had also received the same order, run ahead. When he was close to Hualin County, Lin Zhengren slowed down and observed the situation with extreme caution. What surprised him was that Hualin County was very peaceful and there were no disturbances. The danger that he had anticipated did not occur. This kind of doubt continued until he stepped into Xian City. Chapter 688. Jiang Wang flew through the rain. Rumble. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky. Raindrops hit his body, and lightning occasionally illuminated his expressionless face. His entire body was drenched by the cold rain, and he didn't even think of using his Tao energy to resist it. He had a lot on his mind. The world was pitch black, and the surroundings were dark. On this stormy night, he felt a cold loneliness. He should be happy after killing Dong A, especially since Dong A was the vice minister of the Zhuang kingdom, a core figure in the rear. Once he was assassinated, it was likely to affect the entire Zhuang kingdom's war. At that time, Zhuang Gaoxian, Duru Hui, and Huangfu Duoming might all die. But at the same time, not many of the 300,000 Zhuang kingdom soldiers fighting on the Yong battlefield would return alive. Jiang Wang felt very conflicted, and he wasn't happy. Dong, it was the only teacher he had ever acknowledged. From being unfamiliar to revered to trusting him. He was very determined to kill Dong A, and, in the end, he did kill him with his own hands. But he didn't feel very happy. There was rain in front of him and behind him. His heart was empty. As he traveled through the storm, it was as if there was only the sound of rain in the entire world. Even his heartbeat was drowned out. At this moment, he missed Jiang Anan very much. When he was drifting away from the entire world, Jiang Anan became his only connection to the real world. Ha! You are not qualified to ask me for an explanation now. Dong A's wild laughter seemed to still ring in his ears. No. It really seemed to be ringing. That laughter seemed to be continuing. That laughter sounded in his heart. Jiang Wang was shocked. When he recalled his abnormality, the first thing he thought of was Jiang Yen. He had always been on guard against Jiang Yen, but the netherworld candle in Heaven Connecting Palace was so calm. And when he fought with Dong A, he saw with his own eyes that Jiang Yen and Dong A's Prime Minister seal were both injured. At that time, Jiang Yen was already unconscious. He shouldn't have been able to recover so quickly. Jiang Wang spread out a sea of spiritual flowers and covered the netherworld candle. Then, he summoned a group of spiritual snakes to swim in the sea of flowers. If Jiang Yen made any strange moves, he wouldn't hesitate to shed all pretense of cordiality at this moment. Ha ha ha! The netherworld candle didn't move. But Dong A's voice was still there. Why was she still able to hear his voice when she was already dead? Why is he still haunting me? Jiang Wang stopped in the sky in the heavy rain. His eyes were bloodshot. Dong A, he shouted. Dong A, come out. I will kill you. I'll kill you. I will kill you. I'm going to kill you again. His voice couldn't travel far in the rainy night and was soon blocked by the sound of the rain. Ah! Dong A's wild laughter rang out again. Dong A, where are you? The star-twining python was rarely seen roaming the starry river, shuttling back and forth within the Tongtian Palace. The Dao Vein true spirit searched for any abnormalities in the Heavenspan Palace. Dong A, where is she hiding? His divine soul leaped into the first inner mansion. Hundreds and thousands of hidden snakes shuttled back and forth in every room. Can't find it. Dong, it was still laughing wildly. His damned laughter was still going on. Jiang Wang clutched his head, feeling a splitting headache. He tumbled in the air. Dong A. Jiang Wang opened his bloodshot eyes. In the torrential rain, he suddenly saw a figure appear. He was wearing a black Taoist robe with a dragon engraved on it. His face was resolute, and he had a short beard. He said, Tao Testimony Deathmatch, begin. Jiang Wang threw a punch, and the figure actually disappeared. His fist only touched the rain. The rain was cold. The headache was killing him. Jiang Wang clenched his fists, and his nails dug into his flesh. He turned his head abruptly. The middle-aged man, with a resolute face, appeared in front of him again. He sat upright in midair. In the future, you can call yourself a disciple in front of me. Go to hell. Jiang Wang put his fingers together and swung his sword energy across. Taking you as a teacher is the most regretful thing in my life. The sharp sword energy cut open the heavy rain curtain, but it couldn't welcome the light. However, that figure shattered again. Jiang Wang, you have to calm down. Jiang Wang, you have to calm down. Jiang Wang endured the pain and hatred and called out to himself with his last bit of rationality. He kept calling out to himself, but Dong A's figure appeared in front of him again. She stretched out her index finger and condensed a jade-colored spike at the tip of her finger. She casually taught, middle-grade Si Dao technique, poison swallowing sting. This Dao technique is very practical and can be used up to mid-grade. Use it in your coffin. Jiang Wang flew forward and raised his knee with a roar. The figure shattered into a black shadow and flowed like water. It spun a few times in the air and suddenly twisted, turning into a black-haired old man. It was Du Ruhui. Du Ruhui looked at him quietly. Didn't you want to kill me? Come. Something was wrong. Something was wrong. The faint rationality in Jiang Wang's heart told him that all of this was not good. Something was wrong. But when he saw Du Ruhui's pretentious and hateful face, Jiang Wang still rushed over recklessly. Punches, kicks, knees, elbows. The face shattered again, and only the rain continued to pour down. What exactly went wrong? Jiang Wang thought hard. Then, the general appeared. Huang Fu Duanming, who was wearing heavy armor and holding a guandao, appeared in front of him. It's just a city of people. It doesn't matter if they die. I've been fighting my whole life. How many lives have I taken? What can you do? Ha! 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 Jiang Wang gasped for breath. I will kill you. I will kill you sooner or later. The Huangfu Duanming in front of him turned into Zhuang Gaoxian, who was wearing a dragon robe. He stood with his hand behind his back and looked noble and domineering. The 3,000 miles of mountains and rivers of the Zhuang country belong to me. The millions of people in the Zhuang country are all under my rule. How can I not give up the small to protect the big? Who do you think you are? How dare you order me around? The mountains and rivers of the Zhuang country belong to the people of the Zhuang country. They are not yours alone. Jiang Wang stood in midair shakily and suddenly rushed forward. Everyone has their own life. Who allowed you to give it up? Zhuang Gaoxian, who had turned into a black shadow, did not dodge this time. Instead, he charged straight at him. He merged with Jiang Wang. Hey! Hey! Jiang Wang heard his own voice saying this. In a bone-chilling cold, he suddenly understood many things. In the Maple Forest Dead Zone, hatred overpowered morality for the first time. That was why he went to Wangjiang City to get Xiongmujue. Hatred overpowered reason. That was why he left the Yin country on New Year's Eve and took the risk to come to the Zhuang country to kill Dong A. Unknowingly, he had been eroded by hatred. When the black shadow crashed into his body, Jiang Wang's eyes turned white. He fell straight down from the sky. Before he lost consciousness, the last thought he had was, if this was his inner demon, then what was Jiang Yin? On the same rainy night, in the south of Xian and City, a figure covered in flames streaked across the rain like a shooting star. In the north of Xian and City, a young man who was drenched fell from the sky with his hands on his head. Further north, in a place where the rain could not cover, was Lin Jingren's flying figure. Chapter 689. Compared to other countries' capitals, Xian and City wasn't grand. Not to mention Yang's capital, it couldn't even compare to Mo's capital, Dingwu City. When Zhuang's founding ancestor, Zhuang Changqian, established the capital in Hualin Prefecture, the country was still poor. After a few generations of management, they slowly accumulated some wealth and started to build and expand. However, this capital couldn't get rid of its stinginess. Some ministers suggested to demolish this city and rebuild it, but Du Ruhui stopped them. Du Ruhui said, the stability of the mountains and rivers the importance of the country lies in the people, not in the land, the ruler, not in the city. Zhuang Gaoxian gladly accepted it and said that as long as the country wasn't strong, he wouldn't add a single brick to the capital. When Lin Jingren arrived in front of the city with a cautious heart, he saw a sharp and flamboyant figure sitting on the city gate tower with his spear held horizontally. He was like a door god guarding Xian. Last night's storm had already passed, and the sun had just risen. The sunlight broke free from the long night and shone brightly on Zhu Weiwa. He held his spear horizontally here to show that he was overseeing this city and let the people feel at ease. No matter who the opponent was, no matter who the enemy was, before his Fujin spear was broken, no one would be able to take a step into Xian city. Lin Zhengren narrowed his eyes. Too dazzling, he thought. However, he had to admit that when he saw Zhu Weiwa holding his spear horizontally on the city gate tower, the caution and unease in his heart had already dissipated. Right now, Xian city was very safe. Zhu Weiwa could give people such a feeling. Senior Marshal Brother Zhu, he greeted in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Zhu Weiwa only glanced at him and didn't say anything. Lin Jingren's expression was very calm. He had always known that Zhu Weiwa looked down on him. Under Lord Chancellor's orders, I came back from the front lines to investigate the current situation of the capital. He still explained to Zhu Weiwa before speaking to the guards standing in front of the city gate with their heads held high and their chests puffed out. Where was Prime Minister Dong killed? Bring me to the scene to see the situation. The long street where the battle took place had been completely sealed off, and all clues were preserved as much as possible. Because the strongest people of Zhuang weren't in the capital, and there had to be an outcome to the death of the vice prime minister, they could only seal the scene and wait for those important people to return. Before the blockade was lifted, the houses on both sides of the street could only enter and exit from the back door. Dong A's head and limbs were chopped off. His body was still on the street, untouched. The faces of the two junior brothers who had returned to Xian city with him were pale. Lin Jingren's face was expressionless as he carefully examined Dong A's body. Nothing had been touched, including the storage box. The double-world ruler was lying beside his broken hand. There was a green jade pendant on his chest. It wasn't very expensive. The incisions on the forelimbs and the head were very smooth. The weapon used was a sword, an extremely sharp sword. It cut through the body of an inner mansion cultivator with a divine ability without encountering any resistance. There were slender wounds on the severed limbs and head. They should have been caused by needle-like magical tools, but they were thicker than ordinary needles. Lin Zhengren observed very seriously. He even checked Dong A's hair several times. Then, he got up and observed the entire battle environment. The torrential rain last night had washed away many traces, but some traces could not be washed away by the heavy rain. For example, the shattered floor tiles, the traces left behind by various Dao techniques. Lin Zhengren bent down and picked up an object that had lost its luster. He rubbed it with his fingers and confirmed that it was a piece of rotten wood. Go back and send a message to the Chancellor. He turned around and instructed his two junior brothers. Dong Xiang has been killed. There's only one murderer, and he has already escaped. Xian city is now guarded by senior brother Zhu Weiwa, so it's already safe. There's no need to worry about the rear. Ask them to fight at the front lines without worry. The military situation was urgent, and Zhu Weiwa was in charge of this trip. The two junior brothers of State Academy received the order and hurriedly flew to the front lines. Lin Zhengren was very patient. He walked back and forth from one end of the street to the other 4 times, making sure that he didn't miss out on any details. Finally, he walked up the city tower and came to Zhu Weiwa's side. Senior brother Zhu, he greeted. Zhu Weiwa turned around and looked at him, quietly waiting for him to continue. I observed Dong Xiang's body carefully. I discovered that there were slender wounds on his severed limbs and head. They were caused by needle-like magical tools. I speculated that the effect of those magic tools should be able to restrain Dong Xiang's endless vitality divine art. Lin Zhengren had already prepared his speech and said slowly, This is enough to prove that the murderer was completely targeting Dong Xiang. He was very familiar with Dong Xiang and had made preparations specifically for him. Zhu Weiwa still didn't say anything. From the traces of battle at the scene, I discovered that both sides had consciously controlled the area and didn't affect the commoners on both sides. Lin Zhengrun continued. Dong Xiang was the vice minister of the empire, so it's natural for him to protect the commoners. Why did the murderer do this? I guess the murderer should also be from Zhuang country. At least, he used to be from Zhuang country. When he analyzed until here, he even made a joke, or maybe the murderer is a very good person. Zhu Weiwa was clearly not interested in his humor. There was no expression on his face as he said indifferently, "Say something I don't know." Before Lin Zhengrun, Zhu Weiwa must have already inspected the scene of Dong A's death. Zhu Weiwa wouldn't miss the details that Lin Zhengrun could see. Lin Zhengrun wasn't angry at Zhu Weiwa's impatience. His expression only became serious. I wonder if senior apprentice brother has heard about the matter of the Lin family being completely annihilated. Zhu Weiwa's gaze also changed. It's related to this matter. That person was also an inner palace cultivator with divine abilities. He indeed had the possibility of killing Dong Xiang. Also, Lin Zhengrun said, there's something that everyone might have overlooked at the time, or rather, didn't pay much attention to. I myself was the same. That person barged into Wangjiang City's Dao Academy and forcefully obtained a Dao technique from the Academy's dean. It's called the Rottenwood Method. Zhu Weiwa almost instantly connected the dots. Are you sure it's the same Dao technique? It's much stronger, but I'm sure it comes from the same source. That kind of power, I'm very familiar with it. At this point, Lin Zhengrun was also rather vexed. Why didn't he mention the Rottenwood Method back then? How could a Dao technique that could catch the eye of an inner palace cultivator with divine abilities be simple? It definitely had the potential that Wangjiang City's Dao Academy's dean couldn't discover. He continued, the Academy's Fu Baosong also cultivated this technique, so he should be able to confirm this matter. Zhu Weiwa's voice clearly became serious. So what do you know about this person? I was very curious at the time. For some reason, that person seemed to hate my younger brother Zhengli to the core and was determined to kill him. Also, he intentionally chose to drown him. This made me recall that there was a disciple of Maplewood City's Dao Academy who borrowed senior apprentice brother's Xianjin spear to block the entrance to my Lin clan. Zhu Weiwa was expressionless, but the air around him had already become scorching hot. Lin Zhengrun's heart was as calm as a lake. He wasn't the slightest bit affected by Zhu Weiwa's attitude. He still used his own unique rhythm to speak slowly. My younger brother Lin Zhengli is only a wastrel from a small city. What kind of common connection could he have with the virtuous and respected Dong Xiang? I only want one thing. One person, that young cultivator called Jiang Wang. Perhaps everyone in Maplewood City's region back then didn't die out. That person called Jiang Wang has returned. But Lin Zhengrun had a puzzled expression. If that person is Jiang Wang, why did he want to kill Dong Xiang? Wasn't Dong Xiang his teacher back then? Could it be that the matter of Maplewood City's region back then? He paused at this point. That's enough for me. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Chapter 690. Yiyang Prefecture, Dragon Sealing Pass. On the high platform, the civil and military officials left to carry out their orders. In the boundless darkness of the night, Zhuang Gaoxian rose into the air, his body glowing with a clear light, his eyes like that of a deity. He stood high in the sky, overlooking the earth. His voice was so loud that it shook the entire battlefield. Hanin, coincidentally, it was the auspicious time of the festival. The three armies engaged in battle, and the heavens and earth resonated. You will be the Young Lord, and I will be the Zhuangjuan. Why not fight in the blue dome of heaven and beat the drum of the three armies? I'm here to celebrate the spring festival. The Zhuang nation's army cheered in unison. Han Yin, come and die. His voice reverberated through the cold night. Above the dragon sealing mountain pass, A tall and sturdy figure stood on a golden dragon's shadow. The dragon's roar shook the heavens, looking mighty and imposing. The traitor Zhuang Changxian of the past wept blood and begged for mercy in the Qichang mountain range. Only then did I spare his worthless life. Today is New Year's Eve, and Gao Xian has come to congratulate us. We are overjoyed. Han Yin's voice was deep and dignified, rumbling like thunder. I will accept your kindness. I will take your head. On the dragon-sealing mountain pass, the morale of the soldiers rose, and they shouted in unison, "Kill!" Facing Zhuang Gaoxian's challenge, Han Yin did not hesitate. He had experienced countless wars in his life and was very clear about the current situation. The state of Yong appeared to be stable, but in reality, it had reached a critical juncture of life and death. The Zhuang kingdom wasn't strong enough to annex the Yong kingdom, and the Luo kingdom was just a clown. However, the appearance of the Jing kingdom's Qima guards had a completely different significance. The Jing kingdom was one of the most powerful countries in the world. The Yong kingdom had been struck down in a contest with the Jing kingdom. Later on, the Yong kingdom no longer had the qualifications to contend with the Jing kingdom. Regardless of whether they admitted it or not, the Yong kingdom's soldiers and civilians found it difficult to shake off their fear of the Jing kingdom. That was why he had Minister of State Qi Maoxian personally oversee Jing'an Prefecture, because that place was the source of all the instability in the country. But this was not enough. It wasn't that the Yong kingdom didn't have the desire to make progress over the years, but it had always been besieged and intercepted by the kingdom of Jing, suppressing it to the point that it was difficult for it to make a comeback. Before the new year, he had instructed the monarch, Han Su, to take the lead in initiating the four-party talks. Together with the Zhuang nation and the Luo nation, they had set a non-military agreement in Buyao City. This was to stabilize the situation in the southwest of the country. While focusing their energy on guarding against the Jing nation, they would expand to the northwest. The so-called agreement to not enlist was, of course, only a temporary agreement. There is no such thing as an alliance that could truly stop a war. The only thing that could block an army was an army. However, he never expected that the one who tore apart the agreement would not be him, but Zhuang Gaoxian. Unexpectedly, it was Zhuang and Luo who had joined hands to challenge the state of Yong. At such a time, he had to calm the hearts of the people in order to control the situation. They had to display their strength in an undisguised manner so that those restless forces could restrain their greed and boost the morale of their own soldiers. After all, at this moment, the Dragon Sealing Pass was surrounded, the Lan River Underwater Palace was in danger, and the Jing country's Crimson Horse Guards were knocking on the pass. Everyone was in a state of panic. This was also the reason why he had rushed to the Dragon Sealing Mountain Pass at the first possible moment to stop the enemy. If that wasn't the case, it was hard to say whether the powerful nobles in the country wouldn't have other thoughts. It was precisely because of this that he couldn't hesitate in the slightest when facing Zhuang Gaoxian's challenge. On the contrary, he needed to be extremely confident and flamboyant. He wanted to show off his invincible aura. It wasn't that they didn't need to be cautious, but the enemy was already at their doorstep, and there was no room for caution. Of course, he had absolute confidence in dealing with Zhuang Gaoxian. Even if he knew that Zhuang Gaoxian wanted to delay him, he would gladly go forward. Zhuang Gaoxian had just reached true insight, while he had been a perfected person for hundreds of years. There was no reason for him to lose. At most, Zhuang Gaoxian could restrain him and use the advantage of the army to break into the city. However, the state of Yong had one duke, 8 marquises, and 9 deities. How many did the state of Zhuang have? They had an absolute advantage in terms of top-notch combat strength, which was enough to help the state of Yong defend the Dragon Sealing Mountain Pass. Once the various armies of the country surrounded them, they would immediately stop the 300,000 troops of the state of Yong. Furthermore, could Zhuang Gaoxian really restrain him? Han Yin didn't believe it. Zhuang Gaoxian stepped on the illusory image of a golden dragon as he arrived. Zhuang Gaoxian stood in the air, his gaze cold as he said, "You despicable person who usurped the state of Yong dares to call yourself emperor?" Zhuang Gaoxian's ancestor, Zhuang Changxian, had knelt down and begged for mercy. If Zhuang Changxian had lost, Han Yin wouldn't have let him off no matter how much he begged. It was because he had firmly defended the Qichang mountain range in front of Han Yin that the state of Zhuang had its foundation. However, Han Yin was relying on his long life and high seniority to make up stories of the past. No one could refute him. After all, Zhuang Changxian had been buried for many years. This was a good way to attack the morale of the Zhuang army. How could Zhuang Gaoxian show weakness? Thus, he immediately replied, "Back then, Yongming's emperor, Han Zhou, was truly a mighty ruler. He was wise and wise in the Eastern Palace and had a successor. Who would have thought that in one night, Han Zhou would die and the Eastern Palace would be harmed? The state of Yang's hegemony would come to nothing and it would weaken again. Han Yin, do you really think that no one remembers what happened back then? He pointed at Han Yin. You colluded with the state of Jing to assassinate Han Zhou. You murdered the crown prince and instigated the three princes to fight for the throne. When the country was in turmoil, you jumped out to fight for power, pretending to be benevolent. On one hand, you persuaded the three imperial nephews to stop fighting. On the other hand, you suddenly sent out troops and defeated them one by one, personally killing them. You are truly a shameless man, a scum of society. Ignorant brat." Han Yin stepped on the dragon and slapped down with a domineering aura. "Back then, your mother was still in your mother's womb. What kind of insanity did you have? How dare you speak of the past?" The so-called insight realm was precious in the word truth. The immortal ascension realm was known as the immortal realm in ancient times. It was a false immortal realm where one's physical body did not deteriorate before death. The immortal realm of immortal realm was the insight realm. Han Yin slapped condensed a huge palm print in the air. It grew bigger and bigger from bottom to top, as if it was going to overturn the sky. The entire night sky was shaken. The boundless dark clouds were scattered by the slap, revealing the starry night sky and boundless moonlight. Zhuang Gaoxian, who was in front of the night sky, did not move. The slap directly hit him, but had already passed him. It did not affect him at all. The clouds behind him were dispersed, and the starlight and moonlight shone clearly behind him. His sonorous voice did not stop. "Han Yin, none of your elder brothers, dozens of princes and princesses survived. Why? Poor Han Zhou. He was a mighty ruler who personally pushed Yong to the peak and looked down on the western region. In the end, he ended up without any descendants, all because of a despicable and shameless trash of a younger brother like you. You killed your elder brother and nephew to obtain the throne. Since you took power, what achievements have you made that are worthy of praise? Did you expand Yang's territory? Did you repel Jing back then? Or did you strike a deal with Jing, using the death of Emperor Yongming and a huge amount of wealth to buy Jing's retreat? Do you think no one in the world knows?" Zhuang Gaoxian cupped his hands towards the horizon. "Our dynasty's Emperor Taizu sensed your wild ambition. He received Emperor Yongming's dying order and fought a bloody battle in the Qichang mountain range to protect Emperor Yongming's bloodline. Although he did not succeed, his sincerity can be seen. You shameless villain, incompetent scoundrel, how dare you tarnish his reputation?" Chapter 691. Zhuang Gaoxian's words were half true and half false. Emperor Yongming's death back then was suspicious. The death of the crown prince was definitely part of a conspiracy. As for whether it was his brothers or his uncle Han Yin who killed the crown prince, it was hard to say. However, there was at least one point. When Emperor Yongming died in battle, Zhuang Changxian was still guarding the manor and could not have received any orders. Moreover, Han Yin had indeed turned the tide. Under the attack of the Jing kingdom, he had managed to defend his territory without losing anything. There was no such thing as using huge amounts of wealth to buy the Jing kingdom's retreat. If the Jing kingdom could swallow up the Yong kingdom, they would not give up no matter how much wealth and resources they were given. In these years, the Yong kingdom had indeed been on the decline, but it was mainly because of the Jing kingdom's suppression and not Han Yin's incompetence. Zhuang Changqian, who took advantage of Emperor Yongming's death to establish the country, became the most loyal and even the only official. To protect the bloodline of Emperor Yongming, he fought a bloody battle in the Qichang mountain range. How touching was this? When this shocking secret came out of Zhuang Gaoxian's mouth, it would shock anyone who heard it. As a ruler, one must be sincere and respect the heavens and the people. Han Yin waved his sleeves, and 9 golden dragon images circled around him. The Zhuang family is despicable. They stole the land of Yong and called themselves a country. Everyone has abandoned them. Today, when your majesty sees the son of Yong, instead of begging for forgiveness, you actually use your mouth? There was no benefit for him to be entangled in this topic. No matter how he tried to cover it up, he had stolen the throne from his nephew and had not obtained the country properly. As such, he categorized these words as bullshit and scolded Zhuang Gaoxian for using his mouth and not being fit to be a ruler. He even punched out, shaking the heavens and earth. In an instant, starlight fell from the sky and covered Zhuang Gaoxian in a dense rain of light. The sky shook as if the stars in the distance were being stirred up. Can your slippery tongue break through my dragon sealing pass? Can it save your life? Han Yin pressed forward. It was as though the entire world was behind him, crushing everything in its path. You can't speak well, and your fists are weak. Zhuang Gaoxian smiled and faced the rain of light. Han Yin, you are old. Yong Kingdom Shunan Prefecture, Ningyuan City. The black-haired old man stepped out from the void. Zhuang Country's Du Ruhui pays a visit to your honorable place. Black light swirled around his fist as he punched out. Ningyuan City's Great City Protection Array had activated a light screen in an emergency, faintly trembling. And from the south, a tyrannical aura was rushing over. Du Ruhui didn't even try. With a turn of his feet, he appeared in the Yong Kingdom's southern rural manor. This time, it was not in the prefecture, but in front of Small County. He stomped down from the sky, unleashing the power of a top-notch Ascension God expert without reservation. With a single strike, he flattened the entire county. The magistrate of the county had no time to react before he died tragically in the collapsed county office. There were powerful auras approaching from both the south and the east at an astonishing speed. Du Ruhui was expressionless. With another turn of his feet, he appeared in the eastern part of the state of Yong, in the prefecture of Fuchin. This time, it wasn't even a county. It was just a village. Du Ruhui showed no mercy and directly waved his sleeve, raising a blazing sea of fire. Then, he turned around and left the sea of fire amidst howls of anguish. He didn't allow his movements to follow any pattern, nor did he have a clear goal, because that was the path to death. He himself didn't know where he would appear, only within the boundaries of the state of Yong, allowing his abilities to descend at random. And no matter where he appeared, no matter what he faced, he would attack without hesitation. He roamed the interior of the state of Yong alone, using the tens of thousands of Yong commoners as hostages, forcing the state of Yong to dispatch a large number of experts to surround and kill him. Up until now, there were already 4 marquises of Yong participating in the encirclement. He moved faster and faster, and his opportunities to attack grew fewer and fewer. Often, he would have to leave as soon as he appeared. He still hadn't exchanged blows with any of the marquises of Yong. It seemed like he was leisurely strolling through a courtyard, but he knew his own situation. Once the so close, yet worlds apart was restricted, he would likely be the first to fall under the siege of 4 Ascension God experts. There had already been several marquises of Yong chasing after him. The situation had never been stable. He was actually walking on the edge of a cliff, on the brink of extreme danger. However, he was extremely calm, his face devoid of sorrow or joy. He only needed to do his own thing well. As long as everyone in the state of Zhuang did their own thing well, they would be able to defeat the state of Yong. He firmly believed in this. By restraining the fighting power of the 4 Shindu from Yong, he had already accomplished his strategic objective. The only thing he needed to do now was to prolong this pursuit and delay his own defeat. Then, he would leave the outcome to the others from the Zhuang kingdom. Duruhui was the prime minister, and Huangfu Duanming was the general. They had worked together for many years. To the great general of Zhuang, Huangfu Duanming, at this moment there was nothing he needed to consider. Kill the opponent or be killed by the opponent. That was all. Even if he was facing 2 marquises of Yong alone. Even if his armor was shattered in many places and his battle robes were dyed red with blood. He was an unwavering advocate of war. Facing the state of Yong, which frequently provoked him on the border, he had endured humiliation for so many years. He only hated that his guandao wasn't fast enough and his fists weren't hard enough. A general was the courage of 3 armies. He wouldn't lose any of his courage. The battle that would determine the fate of the state of Zhuang for the next 100 years was at this moment. He wouldn't allow himself to fear death in the slightest. The glory and glory of a general's life were at this moment. He raised his guandao. Although he was clearly heavily injured and weak, he still attacked repeatedly, as if he had the upper hand. The Zhejiangxian armor commander, Duan Li, was clad in heavy armor and wielding a pair of iron maces. He faced the Marquis of Chengde, Li Ying, head-on. Li Ying was one of the more senior marquises in Yong. When he was young, he had participated in quelling the rebellion of the 3 princes. He had great prestige in the army. He wasn't like the Marquis of Huaixiang, Yao Qi, who had been beaten down by the Yong court in recent years and harbored resentment. He didn't hold back in a battle, killing Duan Li left and right. If it weren't for the white feather army commander, who had turned his drawing blade into a streak of blade light and circled around him, Duan Li would have been dead already. He would have already killed Duan Li in front of the formation. The 2 commanding generals were both top-notch experts, but they were still nothing in front of Li Ying. Victory was only a matter of time. Even though Yang's #1 Ascension god, Duke Beigongyu, was pinned down in the Lana Underwater Prefecture, and Prime Minister Qi Maoxian was held back in Jinggan Prefecture by the Crimson Horse Guards. However, in this battle with the state of Zhuang, the top-notch experts of Yong still held the absolute advantage. Yong had 1 duke and 8 marquises, a total of 9 divine realm experts. The entire state of Zhuang only had Du Ruhui and Huangfu Duanming. When Han Yin personally stepped forward to fight, Yang's foundation was fully displayed, showing off its strength. There didn't seem to be much suspense in this battle at the Dragon Sealing Pass. There was no suspense in the outcome of the battle between Zhuang and Yong. This was the message that Han Yin wanted to convey. Looking at the entire battle, the state of Zhuang's only advantage was its army. Unlike the state of Zhuang, which had been prepared and secretly gathered for a long time, the state of Yong broke through in one day. The state of Yong had been peaceful for a long time. Aside from suffering losses in their conflicts with the state of Jing, most of the time, they bullied their neighbors and enjoyed peace. This time, the state of Yong suddenly accepted the challenge. However, they couldn't gather at the pass so quickly. The state of Zhuang's 2 powerful armies, the Zhejiang Profound Armor and the White Feather Army, didn't form a military formation and participate in the battle between the top-notch forces. Instead, they joined the tide of 300,000 soldiers, surging wave after wave toward the pass. The will of the Zhuang army's commander was very clear. He didn't care about sacrificing lives to break through the pass in the shortest amount of time. Kill the heroes in the famous city. Chapter 692. The setting sun was as red as blood. The battle in front of the Dragon Sealing Pass was intense. This battle had lasted for an entire night and day. The most eye-catching battle was happening in the sky. The 2 enlightened masters were fighting to the death. Of course, many people probably couldn't see anything. It was like 2 suns were lit up in the sky, shining brightly. As for the real sun that was sinking further into the West Mountains, its radiance was also obscured at this moment, appearing somewhat dim. Han Yin's body was surrounded by a golden dragon shadow. His every move was domineering. The relatively young Zhuang Gaoxian was much more reserved. He didn't have any radiance, but he was able to block Han Yin's attacks. Zhuang Gaoxian, who had been keeping a low profile in the palace for many years, broke through and became a true insight cultivator. This made Han Yin's killing intent burn. For the past year, he had been looking for a chance to kill Zhuang Gaoxian and not give him time to grow. However, Zhuang Gaoxian had always been careful. Until now, he had only shown his strength once on Zhuang Mo's front line. He didn't expect that the second time he showed his strength would be on Zhuang Yang's battlefield. What Han Yin didn't expect was that Zhuang Gaoxian didn't seem like he had just entered true insight. His true strength was unparalleled. Even though he was confident in his life, he still couldn't take him down after fighting for a day and a night. He thought that he had reached the peak of the Nine Dragons Tyrant Manual and wasn't weaker than his brother Hanzhou. Killing Zhuang Gaoxian should be easy. However, he didn't expect that he couldn't kill Zhuang Gaoxian, even though he was suppressing him. Zhuang Gaoxian's tenacity was terrifying. It was as if he could last forever. Looking at the entire battlefield, the tenacity of the people of Zhuang wasn't only shown by Zhuang Gaoxian. Duan Li and He Bidao fought until the Starlight Sacred Tower collapsed, but they were still fighting. Huangfu Duanming's Guan blade was broken, and a part of his scalp was sliced off. He was in a sorry state, but he was still fighting with his broken blade. In this day and night, the Zhuang army lost many lives, but their attacks were still as fierce as before. The people of Zhuang can't die for nothing. Chen Shikai wrote this sentence with his blood, which became a mark in the hearts of every Zhuang soldier. Du Ruhui, who controlled the emotions of the people and claimed that he could control the flood, had lost an arm. This was the price he paid to get rid of Yang's Marquis Weini. The seed of his divine ability had already sprouted and blossomed. With the so close, yet world-apart ability, it was no exaggeration to say that he could travel thousands of miles by himself. But this time, there were no less than 4 marquises from the Yong kingdom pursuing him. There was an endless stream of secret and forbidden techniques. It was constantly compressing the space he had to maneuver. If he had fled out of Yong from the start, no one would have been able to catch up to him. For the Yong side to dispatch 4 marquises of Yong to pursue and trap him, it was not as if they did not believe that killing Du Ruhui was more important than achieving a great victory at the Sealing Dragon Pass. While the 4 marquises of Yong pursued Du Ruhui, not giving him the opportunity to destroy the hinterland of Yong, they also expended a great deal of energy and tacit understanding to seal off any possibility of Du Ruhui escaping the Yong border. Now it seemed it was only a matter of time before he was completely surrounded and killed. Everyone, including Du Ruhui himself and the 4 marquises, knew that Du Ruhui's defeat was only a matter of time. However, time itself was the biggest problem. Every time they thought the time had come, Du Ruhui would create a gap and continue to tangle with them. Marquis Fengu. In that brief moment of intersecting, Marquis Waning, the most senior of the 4 marquises of Yong, sent over a spiritual sense. Du Ruhui can no longer escape. Go to Dragon Sealing Pass and participate in the defense of the city. You must ensure an all-around victory and hurt them in one go. Without another word, Marquis Fengu turned and flew away. Of the 4 marquises of Yong who had participated in the encirclement and pursuit, he was the least skilled in encirclement and had always been known for his explosive killing power. But Du Ruhui's current state no longer required him to participate in the encirclement. Du Ruhui only needed to be entangled once more to be killed. There was no difference whether he was there or not. But if he joined the battlefield at the Dragon Sealing Pass, he could influence the direction of the war to a certain extent. Sensing Marquis Fengu's departure, the pressure on Du Ruhui lessened, but his heart did not relax at all. The war against Yong this time was a war he and Zhuang Gaoxian had led together. They had planned for many years and prepared many contingencies. They were originally extremely confident. However, Han Yin's demeanor was the same as before. He had suddenly come out of seclusion and risked his life to firmly hold down the Dragon Sealing Pass. Vice Minister Dong A, who had been in charge of the rear, had suddenly died. In a situation where they did not know what was going on behind them, They could only take the risk and bring forward the decisive battle. The outcome of the war had already moved in an unknown direction. Now that things had come to this, they could only fight with all their might. However, he had already done all he could to stall four godlike experts for a day and night. Even if he risked his life, he could not do more. He was very clear what Marquis Fenji's departure meant. However, they could only watch helplessly. There was nothing they could do. The closer it was to this point, the more he could not be rash. He had been walking on the edge of a cliff. A moment of carelessness, and he would fall into the abyss. If he died in battle now, there would be 3 more godlike marquises participating in the battle of the Dragon Sealing Pass. That would directly cut off all hope of victory. Therefore, he had to be even more cautious. He had to stall these 3 marquises for a longer period of time and wait for a change to occur in front of the Dragon Sealing Pass. Duruhui was not the only one struggling on the edge of despair. Duanli tore off the tattered armor that hung on his body. He only had 1 iron mace left in his hand. He was known for his powerful physique and astonishing defense, but under the attacks of Li Ying, a divine descent expert, he was already on the verge of collapse. 4 Starlight's sacred towers had been destroyed. He was almost certain that there was no hope of godlike descent. Hibadeo, who was focused on attacking, was not much better off. Only 1 white tiger sacred tower remained, still defending in the distant sky. The other 3 had long been shattered into starlight and returned to the universe. Everyone in the Zhuang state, from the king down, was looking forward to victory. Everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. However, victory did not seem to be something that could be won just by looking forward to it. It was also not something that could be won by fighting with one's life on the line. Duanli let out a heavy gasp. He gritted his teeth and fought. However, Li Ying, who was approaching him, suddenly turned and grabbed Hibadeo's surging saber light. He had grabbed his real body. Hibadeo was already at the end of his rope. This had happened so suddenly that he had no time to dodge. Li Ying's hand twisted, and he had already plucked off his head. Zhuang State's Saber Dao Grandmaster, a top-notch outer tower expert, and the main general of the White Feather Army that guarded the capital, Hibadeo, had died in battle. Duanli let out a muffled roar in his throat and charged forward. He burned all of his remaining Dao energy and blood chi. He was covered in blood. He had to keep him alive. He had to keep him alive. There was still a chance. There was still a chance. He roared in his heart. However, Ling only glanced at him indifferently. He rose from the ground and went straight into the sky. His target was Zhuang Gaoxian. Hibadeo's head rolled down and spun a few times on the battlefield. He faced the direction of the Dragon Sealing Pass. In his eyes that had lost all luster, a majestic figure rushed up the pass and placed the flag of the Zhuang state on the city tower. That was Zheojiang Xianjia, the only deputy general of the Soaring Dragon Realm. He was Du Yehu, who walked the path of ancient military cultivation. He placed a broken flag on top of the pass. Under the infusion of his Dao energy, the flagpole directly smashed the bricks of the city and firmly fixed itself. The broken flag fluttered. He was like a mad tiger. He roared to the sky. The humiliation of 100 years. Today, I will return it. The Dragon Sealing Pass was broken. Chapter 693. The fall of the Dragon Sealing Pass was foreseeable. The 300,000 soldiers of Zhuang attacked without any regard for their sacrifices, while the reinforcements of Yong were unable to enter the battlefield immediately. However, the fall of the Dragon Sealing Pass didn't mean that victory was decided. Large batches of Zhuang soldiers charged into the city and started fighting with the guards of the Dragon Sealing Pass. The war continued. In the sky where the naked eye couldn't see, Han Yin suppressed Zhuang Gaoxian and attacked. Han Yin was arrogant and domineering, but his attacks were swift and fierce. Zhuang Gaoxian, on the other hand, was like a blade of grass in the wind. Even if he was blown around, he could still stand up. At this moment, Li Ying, who had killed the White Feather Army's general, Hibadeo, flew into the sky. "Your Majesty, Li Ying is late." He crossed his palms and was about to join the attack on Zhuang Gaoxian. As a present-age enlightened master, although he was fighting to the death with Zhuang Gaoxian, everything that happened in the Dragon Sealing Pass was clearly seen by Han Yin. He noticed that the Marquis of Chengde, Li Ying, crippled the Zhejiang Xian Armor's general, Duan Li, and killed the White Feather Army's general, Hibadeo. At the same time, he also noticed that the Dragon Sealing Pass had fallen to Zhuang's army. He originally didn't want others to interfere in the battle. Even if he killed Zhuang Gaoxian in the end, his strength would be questioned. Yong, who was surrounded on 3 sides, couldn't accept being questioned. However, the Dragon Sealing Pass had already fallen. The symbolic meaning of this was far greater than the actual meaning. He couldn't wait any longer. Therefore, he stepped to the side and gave Li Ying space to participate. At the same time, he punched out, activating the 9 Dragons Tyrant Manual to the limit. The image of a golden dragon roared and gradually solidified. Li Ying didn't hesitate and separated his palms. Within the Temple of Accumulation, his primordial spirit also separated. The Spine Ocean contained the Heavenly Palace. The Torso Ocean contained the 5 prefectures. The Four Limbs Ocean contained the Starlight Tower, and the Head Ocean contained the Temple of Accumulation. The Spine Ocean, Torso Ocean, Four Limbs Ocean, and Head Ocean were also known as the Heavenly Ocean, 5 Prefectures Ocean, Hidden Star Ocean, and Primordial Spirit Ocean. This person possessed the 4 prefectures and could only reach the divine arrival realm. Even if he, Li Ying, was one of the few divine descent experts, if he wanted to participate in the battle of the enlightened masters of the present age, he would still need to use his full strength in every attack. Only then would he have a chance of influencing the battle. At this moment, his primordial spirit, Li Ying, one palm held up the sky while the other covered the earth. Then, the heaven and earth combined, shaking the space and crushing toward Zhuang Gaoxian. That old bastard Han Yin is indeed a skeleton in the grave. His heart and spirit have already been extinguished. Zhuang Gaoxian turned around and dodged. With a flip of his hand, heaven and earth were turned upside down. The river of stars beneath his feet surged, and the battlefield on the horizon hung upside down. Everything was turning upside down. Li Ying's palm struck towards Han Yin, but Han Yin's fists also struck towards Li Ying. Oomph! Han Yin clenched his fists and snorted coldly. Instantly, everything returned to normal. The golden dragon circled around his fist as he smashed Zhuang Gaoxian down again. Zhuang Gaoxian had no time to dodge, so he countered with a punch. His fists were simple and straightforward. It was like a stone that had been buried in the ground for 1,000 years, silent and stubborn. But finally, one day, the dirt was washed away and exposed to the world. It was tough, unyielding, and brave. Fist against fist, arrogant and domineering, and pressing forward courageously. The 2 enlightened masters of the present age clashed head-on, stirring up the wind and clouds on the horizon. Terrifying tremors were occurring, as if the heavens and earth were shaking. The frightening star energy stirred the Milky Way. The Earth Dragon of the human world had already overturned. If they continued to fight in their strongest state, the entire Yiyang prefecture wouldn't be able to withstand it. At this moment, a pair of palms that seemed to be cast from steel and could overturn the heavens and earth landed on Han Yin's back. It was so sudden. It was Li Ying. Han Yin had already broken the reversal and returned to normal. But Li Ying's palm didn't return to normal. Instead, it landed firmly on Han Yin's back. Han Yin hadn't expected this attack at all. Li Ying, the Marquis of Chengde, had been loyal officials of Yong for 3 generations. Moreover, Li Ying had already fought under his command during the rebellion of the 3 princes. No matter how he looked at it, there was no possibility of Li Ying defecting to Zhuang Gaoxian. Furthermore, in the previous battle, he had put in a lot of effort for the Yong kingdom. He had personally killed the 2 experts from the Zhuang kingdom who had the greatest hope of breaking through to the ascension of the gods. He had crippled one and crippled the other. How could such a performance be considered defecting to Zhuang Gaoxian? But the truth had already happened. Han Yin had to admit that he felt a chill in his heart. Zhuang Gaoxian, this rising star, was truly too frightening. He didn't lose out to Zhuang Chengxian in the past. His strength, talent, decisiveness, and scheming were all top-notch. Moreover, he had an absolutely callous heart. How loyal were Duan Li and Hibadeo? These two generals had put their lives on the line and gambled everything to delay Li Ying for so long. But Zhuang Gaoxian had planned to sacrifice them from the start. Sacrificing two top-notch experts was to create an opportunity for Li Ying to strike. What was even more frightening was that Zhuang Gaoxian had paid such a huge price. It was impossible that he didn't have a backup plan to overturn the situation. The first thing that came to Han Yin's mind was that he didn't care about his injuries. Even as he coughed up more blood, he reached out and clawed. He was a ruthless and decisive person. Based on his experience in countless battles, he clearly sensed the danger and used his full strength without hesitation. This grab had already mobilized Yang's national strength. Li Ying was naturally a powerful cultivator of Shenlin. It was very difficult to kill him instantly if he was prepared. But he was also a marquis of Yong. He had accepted his position and enjoyed his rewards. But he also had to accept his responsibilities. Unless Zhuang Gaoxian immediately used Zhuang's national strength to protect Li Ying wouldn't be affected. But that was exactly what he wanted. Using Yang's national strength to suppress Li Ying was the most suitable and direct method. This kind of sharpness and decisiveness was not something an ordinary person could possess. Han Yin wanted to crush Li Ying to death and cut off any variables before dealing with the situation. But this grab, he missed. Han Yin was horrified. He didn't care about anything else and turned to leave. It wasn't that he had made a mistake. But when he tried to mobilize Yang's national strength, the endless stream of national strength was suddenly cut off, not giving him any support at the crucial moment. There was only one explanation for this. Someone at Destiny Residence had cut off his connection with Yang's national strength. Destiny Residence had changed. Although the Dragon Sealing Pass was important, Destiny Residence was the foundation of Yong. He had to return immediately, but the situation had already developed to this point. How could Zhuang Gaoxian let him go? But with a raise of his thick eyebrows, his entire aura was completely different. From a seemingly peaceful and ordinary aristocrat, he had become a truly majestic and domineering monarch. He displayed the might and sharpness of a monarch. At this moment, the huge rock buried in the ground exploded, rumbling as it smashed through the mountains and rivers. Die with me. His left hand grabbed and sealed the space. His right fist pierced through space and arrived in front of Han Yin. These two moves seemed simple and direct, but they were domineering and fierce. They displayed the Taoist master's grasp of the essence of heaven and earth. Han Yin didn't lack courage, but he was unwilling to fight in this kind of situation for no reason. With a swipe of his hand, Zhang Xian tore open the seal and prepared to leave. But at this moment, the magnificent armor he wore, the invincible battle armor he had inherited from his elder brother, Han Zhou, suddenly glowed and countless characters floated on the surface of the armor. It actually froze him in place. At this moment, Han Yin suddenly thought of the scene. It was before he had broken out of seclusion and made the prompt decision to come to the Dragon Sealing Pass. His son, the current monarch of Yong, was kneeling before him with tears in his eyes. This child is incompetent and can't share father's burden. Thus, I put on this armor for father. I only hope that father will succeed and return safely. He personally put on this armor for him. At this moment, Han Yin understood everything. Other than Han Su, who could sever his connection with Yang's national power. Other than Han Su, who could make Marquis Qingde betray him. It wasn't that he couldn't think of it, but that he subconsciously didn't want to think about it. And at this moment, in the suddenly quiet world, Zhuang Gaoxian had already pierced through space and approached Han Yin. Han Su asked me to pass on a message to you, Zhuang Gaoxian said softly. How can a monarch of the world have no power for 100 years? A punch pierced through his chest. His inner residence, Outer Tower, Tongtian Palace, and Yunshan Palace were all shattered with a punch. The 9 dragons collapsed. The ambitious and ruthless Han Een died in front of the dragon sealing pass. Chapter 694. Flutter. A bird jumped up from a branch, flapped its wings, and left without looking back. This was a nameless green mountain. It was especially silent in the cold wind. The birds and beasts were all silent. They could faintly hear the sound of surging water. This place was not far from the vast Qing River. On a slope, in the overgrown weeds, a figure was curled up, motionless. This was a youth who had lost consciousness, but his expression was frozen in pain. He was curled up like a baby without any protection. But even in this unconscious state, his muscles were still tense, as if he was still fighting in his sleep. His left hand was holding a half-scattered seal, and his right hand was holding a sword tightly. He was frozen like a statue. Black fog wandered inside and outside his body. From his neck to his face, there were strange black patterns spreading. The black patterns were like twisted worms. At first glance, they seemed to be wriggling. It was very frightening. The gentleness and determination that usually appeared on this face were all gone, replaced by a sense of evil. It was as if he hated everything in the world. Even in pain, he was brewing some kind of conspiracy. The black fog was deep and agile. As it floated, it drowned the youth. There were only 3 spots on the unconscious youth's body that had not been completely eroded by the black. One was his forehead. His tightly knitted brows seemed to be concentrated with some kind of determination. They were like 2 impregnable passes, firmly blocking the attack of the black patterns and guarding his soul. One was the right hand that held the sword. On the sheathed long sword, there were faint Sanskrit characters leaping out. They firmly plunged into the black fog, like fish leaping into the Black Sea again and again, one after another, taking the place of the fallen. The other was the place where the spine and cervical vertebrae connected. There was a red fire white lotus there. At the same time, it felt hot and cold. It emitted a clear red light and white light, but at the same time, it was resisting the black. He had fainted here for a long time. The long and difficult war was continuing in his body. Everything in the outside world had nothing to do with him for now, even though the situation was stirred up because of him. Tyrant Han Een is dead. The 2 blazing suns in the sky had been extinguished. The real sun had not completely set, stubbornly releasing its afterglow in the west. Under the tragic light of the setting sun, it was raining. The next rain was a rare occurrence in this land, and it would be difficult to see it again. Blood red rain. It was the color of blood that even the setting sun could not taint. It was an extremely pure and bloody color. The fall of a Taoist master caused the heavens and earth to mourn. Zhuang Gaoxian carried Han Yin's corpse with one hand and flew into the air above the dragon sealing pass. He shouted loudly, "The outcome has been decided. Those who surrender will be spared from death." His voice was like the roar of a dragon and the roar of tiger. He released his brashness and domineering aura without holding back. He had just ascended to the throne and had not even grasped the power of the imperial court yet, but he dared to personally lead an army to fight against a stronger monarch. In terms of strength and sharpness, he was even better than the founding ancestor. He hid his injuries in the depths of the palace and recuperated for many years. It was fine if he didn't fly, but he soared into the sky. It was fine if he didn't make a sound, but once he did, he would amaze the world. How many years of lying in wait? Once he made his move, he ascended to the true insight realm and became a Taoist master of the present age. With a flip of his palm, he killed a general of the Mo kingdom and forcefully cut off 10 cities of the Mo kingdom. The second time he made a move, he went all out in a war. As the weak, he defeated the strong and personally killed the ambitious and ruthless Han Een. The disposition of a mighty ruler was already formed. From now on, Zhuang Gaoxian, did not need to hide his strength. Zhuang Gaoxian's voice rumbled as blood rain fell from the sky. The 2 marquises that were working together to kill Huangfu, Duanming stopped without saying anything. They turned around and fled. However, the world was so big that they did not know where to go. Even if they were God-descending cultivators and marquises, they were unable to dispel their fear. Han Ying was dead, an ambitious and ruthless person, a perfected person of the current era, a person who had ruled Yong for hundreds of years. If even Han Ying could die, who could not? Marquis Fenguf flew all the way. Just as he arrived outside the dragon ceiling pass, he felt the tip of his nose wet. He raised his head and saw blood rain falling from the sky. Heaven and earth were mourning. He thought that Lord Zhuang had fallen. However, Zhuang Gaoxian's voice shattered his fantasy. He rushed over, but did not even have time to take a look at the dragon ceiling pass. He turned around and fled for his life. Even Han Ying had died in battle. Even if he had 9 lives, it would not be enough for him to explain himself here. Yong was finished. He felt a great sense of grief, and his eyes couldn't help but sting. A god-descending cultivator was like a stray dog, crying as he fled. Nothing could escape Zhuang Gaoxian's gaze. However, he did not pursue anyone and had no intention of leaving 1 or 2 marquises behind. He stood above the dragon ceiling pass and turned to look at Marquis Qingde, Li Ying. Go back and tell Han Su to release Prime Minister Du immediately. This battle is over. I can promise that I will not take an inch of land north of the dragon ceiling pass. This was the redrawing of borders and the confirmation of victory. Han Ying, who had monopolized power for hundreds of years and had no intention of relinquishing it, was the biggest problem. He had been the ruler for over 100 years and also a puppet for over 100 years. On the matter of killing Han Ying, Han Su and Zhuang Gaoxian had reached a consensus. However, at the same time, Zhuang was still a strong competitor for Han Su's Yong. This was why Li Ying, the Marquis of Qingde, was so ruthless that he killed one and crippled the other of the 2 most likely to break through to Shenshao. What was clear was that if Han Su had the chance, he would definitely not mind killing the Zhuang country's pillars before the war stopped. Zhuang Gaoxian's words were both to show that he would keep his promise and also to warn Han Su. If Du Ruhui died in battle, then he would not keep his promise. Han Su knew very well that Zhuang Gaoxian did not dare to occupy all of Yong at this time, as that would cause Zhuang to explode. However, Han Su himself did not dare to take the risk. Yong, who had cut off his wrist and mutilated his body, did not have the qualifications to take risks. This official will definitely pass on your message. Li Ying looked deeply at Zhuang Gaoxian before turning and flying away. As Han Su's absolute confidant and the Marquis of Yong who had attacked Han Ying at the last moment, Li Ying, the Marquis of Qingde, completely approved of Han Su's decision. In his opinion, Han Su was a monarch who was 100 times stronger than Han Ying. It was just that he had not been able to use it. Han Ying was a perfected person of the present age. Until his death, he would not have any problems with aging. However, his spirit was already old. He did not have the same mindset as Emperor Yongming, Hanzhou. After being beaten by the Jing kingdom for hundreds of years, his heart had already surrendered. No matter how arrogant and domineering he appeared, he could not hide the weakness in his heart. Han Ying had always wanted to surpass his older brother, Hanzhou. However, deep in his heart, he had never believed that he could defeat the Jing kingdom, because that was something that even Hanzhou could not do. Han Ying did not have the confidence to do anything that Hanzhou could not do. He tried his best to wash away the traces of Emperor Yongming, but he could not do so even after hundreds of years. He had lived in Hanzhou's shadow his entire life. This kind of monarch seemed powerful with strategies and strength. However, Yong would only slowly rot and rot in his hands. Han Ying had been in power for hundreds of years, but Yong had not expanded at all. His influence in the western region was diminishing. Yong had reached the point where it could not be built without destruction. It had to be bathed in fire to be reborn. However, Han Ying was too powerful and had ruled this land for too long. Those loyal to Han Su were powerless to overthrow him. That was why they needed to bring in external forces. Li Ying had always been very certain that he was doing the right thing. However, after seeing Zhuang Gaoxian with his own eyes, he could not help but have a trace of doubt. In Han Su's future strategy as monarch and vassal, using the threat of the country's collapse to incite the people to unite against a common enemy. In a controllable state of war, allowing Han Su to quickly and truly take control of the country's military and political power was a first step. Once the time was ripe, he would attack Zhuang, defeat Zhuang Gaoxian, recover lost territory, and establish absolute authority that surpassed Han Yin's. That was the second step. However, would such a Zhuang Gaoxian really be easily defeated? With an indescribable shadow in his heart, Li Ying left the place. Inside Dragon Sealing Pass, the Yong army was already kneeling on the ground. P.S. How should I describe the book reviews these past 2 days? I didn't expect them to have so little confidence in me. Han Su hasn't even made an appearance yet, and a bunch of people are calling him a moron. How can someone who has endured silently for over 100 years and managed to trick such an ambitious and ruthless character like Han Yin be a moron? There are people who say that I'm lousy, that I shouldn't have written, and all sorts of things. Everyone, ask yourselves honestly, I've already written 4 volumes with 6 million words. Have I ever written a lousy plot? I've been writing from 60 monthly subscriptions until now, relying on my savings from writing physical novels to survive. However, in the past year, when have I ever been perfunctory with my readers? I remember that when Zhuo Guanglia left behind the Meridian unlocking pill, at least a few hundred people said it was poisonous. However, after filling that hole, I didn't see a single person apologize to me. Did those hundreds of people stop looking behind them? Or is it that in this era, criticism is easier to say than praise? There will always be more people who criticize you after writing a lousy plot than there are people who encourage you after writing a brilliant plot. I don't think I've ever written a lousy plot. Since I've always been so diligent, can't you wait a bit when you think it's unreasonable? The dragon is there. I just haven't added the finishing touches. So be it. I originally didn't want to say anything. Writing has always been about facing all kinds of voices. I should have long since gotten used to this kind of thing. However, I just haven't gotten used to it. My poetic side makes me very weak sometimes. Chapter 695. Destiny Manor. The benevolent Han Su stood in the hall with his hands behind his back. Compared to Han Yin, he had always presented himself as a benevolent person. Has Du Ruhui been released? He asked. The hall had just been cleaned, and the thick stench of blood had yet to dissipate. The armored Marquis of Wugong stood to the side. This subject only relaxed a little, and he escaped. This person is truly a thorn in Great Yong's side. This time, we have released a tiger back into the mountains. As the youngest Marquis of Yong, Shui Mingyi was a resolute progressive. He was very dissatisfied with the old Yong's stagnant state. In terms of political views, he hit it off with Han Su and had long since pledged his loyalty. How can I not know how terrifying Du Ruhui is? However, matters have their priorities. In the face of a life and death crisis, I can only release the thorn in my flesh. Although this reformation of the state is a time when changes must be made, it is still somewhat dangerous. It is truly difficult for me to be at ease. This is not the time to anger Zhuang Gaoxian. Han Su looked outside the hall. The sky was only a step away from him, and he had already grasped the highest authority in this land. Marquis Waning and the others, what are their attitudes? He asked. Of the 4 marquises of Yong who had participated in the encirclement of Du Ruhui, Marquis Waning had the most experience and could very well represent the attitudes of some of the meritorious nobles. Marquis Waning did not say anything. Shui Mingyi replied. This was a wait and see. This is very good. Han Su nodded. We, ruler and subject, need to produce some results. He took a step forward and extended his hand to support the sky outside the hall. Look at this vast world. It is finally time for us to gallop. He clenched his fist and retracted it as if he had grasped the entire world. Minister Shui, are you confident? Many people are waiting to see you make a fool of yourself, Your Majesty. Shui Mingyi bowed. Han Su strode forward. In this world, there are not many who are blind, but there are many whose hearts are blind. Xuemingyi's spirited face revealed a brilliant smile. I am willing to be the sword in your majesty's hand to slay powerful enemies, break through powerful armies, and sweep the world clean. On the day of Han Yin's death, it had been over 100 years since Han Su ascended the throne. During this long period of time, although he was the ruler, all military affairs and matters of state were decided by Han Yinin. He had been the king of Yong for over 100 years, and had also been a puppet for over 100 years. For anyone who still had ambition, this was the most unbearable torture. He had clearly ascended to the throne, and the power was clearly at hand, but he couldn't touch it at all. His feelings for Han Yin had long since changed from reverence to hatred. Even so, his performance of being a filial son for more than 100 years was flawless. Even though Han Yin had been an ambitious and ruthless person all his life, he had never doubted him. Who would have thought? The good emperor who was lenient to his subordinates, filial to his superiors, and conscientious for more than 100 years. For the sake of grasping complete power, for the sake of becoming the true sovereign, he had not hesitated to invite a wolf into his house, personally dismembering the state of Yong. But it was precisely because this seemed impossible that he was able to succeed. Dragon Ceiling Pass, above the city walls. Zhuang Gaoxian sat there without any dignity, his two legs dangling outside the city, overlooking the Zhuang soldiers going in and out of the city. Du Ruhui, who had lost an arm, was standing very upright at the side. The state of Zhuang wasn't rich, but it could still find the medicine to repair broken limbs. However, returning to its former peak wasn't something that could be done in 2 or 3 days. In this war, the true strategic goal of the ruler and his subjects had been achieved. It could be said that they had achieved a complete victory. From today onwards, the state of Zhuang's territory had crossed the Qichang mountain range and used the Dragon Ceiling Pass as a stronghold, eyeing the hinterland of Yong like a tiger. Even if he stopped advancing, he would still be the undisputed ruler of the state of Zhuang. As for Zhuang Gaoxian, he was still in his prime and had great potential in the future. There was no reason for him to be in a bad mood. Sitting here as the ruler was naturally to calm the hearts of the soldiers and boost their morale. What about the warrior who first ascended the city walls? Zhuang Gaoxian tilted his head and asked, I asked you to invite him over. Why hasn't he come? The attendants looked at each other, and then one of them braced himself and stepped forward. Your Majesty, that Du Yehu is truly hateful. He said that the main general is unconscious and that he doesn't have the face to accept the credit. At this moment, he is serving General Duan and isn't willing to move. How dare he defy the emperor's orders? Should I bring him over? It's just an invitation. How is that a big deal? Besides, he has his reasons. Zhuang Gaoxian smiled and waved his hand. Don't criticize the warrior. He turned his head and met Du Ruhui's gaze. He paused and said, After this, I will personally visit General Duan. After the battle, he didn't visit the injured and unconscious Duan Li. It wasn't because he was negligent. It was because he didn't let Duan Li and Hibadeo know about his cooperation with Han Su of Yong. If they did that, they wouldn't be able to fool Han Yin. Therefore, they were really fighting to the death with Li Yingsheng. They were really fighting to the death for their country. They didn't know the meaning of their battle. It wasn't to defeat the enemy, nor was it to delay the enemy. It was to die in the hands of the enemy and become a bargaining chip to increase the enemy's trust. Hibadeo was dead, and Duan Li was crippled. Even though it was Zhuang Gaoxian's decision, he still subconsciously avoided facing it. Du Ruhui's gaze was telling him that he couldn't do that. Report. Suddenly, someone flew over and knelt in front of the Dragon Ceiling Pass. Your Majesty, there's an urgent report from the lawn and manor. Zhuang Gaoxian frowned. The battle at the Dragon Ceiling Pass had just been settled, and he hadn't had the time to stop the Navy. The Navy was only there to restrict the enemy and didn't have any hopes of achieving any outstanding results. Now that the news came, he felt uneasy, as if the situation was out of his control. Speak, Du Ruhui said. The soldier said loudly, Zhu Weiwa suddenly appeared at the lawn and manor battlefield. When the Qinghe water lord was facing off against Bei Gongyu, he attacked alone and broke through 10 cities. This was obviously good news. If the Zhuang navy could take over the lawn and manor, they definitely wouldn't retreat. At that time, with the lawn and manor and the dragon sealing pass in their hands, the Yong country's fuming manor, which was sandwiched between the lawn and Yiyang manors, would become half a piece of land that could be swallowed by the Zhuang country at any time. Zhuang Gaoxian exchanged glances with Du Ruhui. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. He purposely complained, "Minister Zhu is really impatient. He can't sit still in Xianan City. Toss him into the White Feather Army to prevent him from causing trouble." Although it sounded like a complaint, it was actually praise. Furthermore, the commander of the White Feather Army, Hibadeo, had just died in battle. If Zhu Weiwa went, what position would he take? Anyone with a discerning eye could see Zhuang Gaoxian's satisfaction and expectations for Zhu Weiwa. Report. At this moment, another person flew over. Urgent report from the lawn and manor. The two messengers came one after the other. It was really surprising. Zhuang Gaoxian asked with interest, "What did Zhu Weiwa do again?" Zhu Weiwa, the soldier stammered. "He betrayed the country." "Speak clearly," Du Ruhui said in a low voice. "What exactly happened?" The messenger bowed and said, "Zhu Weiwa broke through 10 cities and collapsed from exhaustion. Fortunately, the soldiers risked their lives to save him. He recovered slightly and left with his spear on the way back to the camp. Our brother stopped him, but he only said, "What did he say?" Zhuang Gaoxian asked. "He said that if the ruler treats his subjects like brothers, then the subjects will treat the ruler like confidants. If the ruler treats his subjects like dogs and horses, then the subjects will treat the ruler like countrymen. If the ruler treats his subjects like dirt, then the subjects will treat the ruler like enemies." The messenger soldier said with fear and trepidation that Zhu Weiwa said that he would definitely not forget the matter of Fenglin. He risked his life to break through the cities and expand the land for the country. He was lucky to not die and had already repaid the kindness of grooming him. From today onwards, he will treat you as enemies. Chapter 696. The Battle of Zhuangyong that shook the West finally came to an end, but the outcome was surprising. First of all, the Zhuang kingdom, which was weaker than the Zhuang kingdom, had actually achieved a great victory. Zhuang Gaoxian killed Han Yin, ending his hundreds of years of rule in Yong. The Zhuang army broke through the Dragon Sealing Pass, shocking the world. At this moment, Han Su, who had always been seen as a puppet, stood up and led his army to confront Zhuang Gaoxian, forcing the Zhuang army to stop their northern expedition. Even so, Yong was still attacked from both sides. The dragon sealing pass that Han Yin was guarding fell, and he died. Han Su led his army and leaned on the horse plains, so no one thought highly of him. However, a second shocking thing happened. The school of Moism, which had always been neutral, sent a large number of disciples to join Yong. In one night, a steel city rose up in the flat plains of Yong. It faced off against the Dragon Sealing Pass. Han Su personally named her Yin Gu to commemorate his father, Han Yin. While fighting on 3 sides, Han Su used the Yin Gu city that was built in one night to reach a ceasefire agreement with Zhuang Gaoxian in the shortest amount of time possible and set up a steel as an oath. Zhuang Gaoxian promised not to advance north, and Han Su also promised to give up the lost land. Zhuang Gaoxian returned to his country, and Han Su returned to Jing'an Prefecture. He personally fought and defeated the famous Red Horse Guards of Jing, chasing them 300 miles out of the country. Yan's Marquis of Wugong Xuanmingyi sent troops west to support Duking Bei Gongyu. The two of them worked together and chased the Zhuang and Luo navy out of Lan and Prefecture. It was also on this day that Han Su announced that Moism was the national school, giving up on the policy of using the 100 schools of thought like Qin and Shu. He chose to use Moism to rule the country. This choice was not good or bad, as each country had their own choices. The Jing country that reigned supreme looked down on the world, while the Qin country that controlled the 100 schools of thought was also the overlord of the West. More importantly, this was the first time that the school of Moism truly owned a country that they supported. In the past, the school of Moism traveled the world and did not stick to one place or city. It was like the 3 punishment palaces of legalism and the 4 great academies of Confucianism. They focused on theory and did not care about country. However, from now on, the school of Moism would lean towards Yong. Perhaps Mai's Gate was just a small trial, but no one could overlook the various changes that would follow. As for Mo Gate support, it undoubtedly proved Han Su's potential. Henceforth, the state of Yong walked out of its perilous situation and stabilized its 4 territories. From this day onwards, Han Su was recognized by the world as the Yong Emperor. It was he who turned the tide and saved this country that was on the verge of extinction. He gave this aging country a new lease of life. If one were to review the overall situation after the war, the biggest winner of this war that involved 4 countries and attracted countless gazes was undoubtedly the Zhuang country. In this kingdom war, the Zhuang state occupied the entire Qichang mountain range, the entire Lingbei prefecture, and a small part of Yiyang prefecture south of the Dragon Ceiling Pass. Today, the area from the south of the Dragon Ceiling Pass to the Qichang mountain range had been merged into one and was officially part of the Zhuang country's territory. The 4th county of the Zhuang country was named Yongchang. Zhuang Gaoxian returned to the court and left 100,000 troops in Yongchang County to control the Dragon Ceiling Pass and face off against the city. The state of Jing sent out their famous cavalry, the Red Horse Guards, but they were unable to take down the Jinggan prefecture that Prime Minister Qi Maoxian was in. Instead, they were forced to stop Zhuang Gaoxian's Han Su and were chased hundreds of miles away from the Yong border and suffered heavy losses. The Luo Navy and Qinjiang Prefecture joined forces and gained a temporary advantage. However, after Marquis Wugong arrived, Beigongyu suddenly exerted force and chased the Zhuang and Luo Navy out of the border. In this kingdom war, the state of Yong suffered heavy losses. They sacrificed their only perfected person, Han Yin, and lost a large amount of land in the south. However, the military and political power was officially taken over by Han Su, and they also gained the support of Mai's Gate. Using this kingdom war, the reform from top to bottom did not face much resistance and could be considered a new life. The state of Jing that came from afar and the state of Luo that took the risk to attack from both sides sent out their troops for nothing. Of course, the commoners did not know that Han Yin's death was the result of Han Su and Zhuang Gaoxian working together. They also did not know that the Duke of Ying, Beigongyu, chose to suddenly exert force after Mai's Gate participated and the situation in the imperial court was set. What they did not know was that the process of Han Su taking over power was not as smooth as they had thought. They did not know about the blood that flowed in the dark and the heads that were cut off. The changes in the political situation clearly affected millions of people, but the moments that determined the changes in the political situation seemed to have nothing to do with the commoners. The young commoners were either still in fear of Yong's destruction or already celebrating their new life. Only the young people who originally lived in Lingbei Prefecture were being moved to Zhuang in large numbers. The remaining commoners had no choice but to get used to their identity as Zhuang citizens. This was no longer Lingbei Prefecture of Yong, but Yong County of Zhuang. The Zhuang standard for residents to move was that those who had a blood feud with the Zhuang army were all dispersed and moved inwards. Those who remained were mostly commoners who had no land or property. These people had the lowest sense of identity with the state of Yong. At the same time, they move a large number of landless commoners from Zhuang to fill up Yong County. After a few generations of management, this place would truly become the land of Zhuang. The group of commoners who had originally been prepared to be driven to Sealing Dragon Pass didn't have to go to their deaths because of the sudden change in the war situation. They were instead driven across the Qichang mountain range and dispersed to various parts of Zhuang to start their lives anew. Jiang Luiyue was in charge of this kind of work. With the war over, this kind of work didn't yield many Dao points. It was excusable that not many disciples of a national academy were willing to accept it. However, because his performance in the war hadn't been satisfactory, he had received very few Dao points. He couldn't refuse this kind of work. Driving away commoners from their homes was something he couldn't quite accept, but it was much better than driving them to their deaths. At least under the governance of Zhuang's court, the commoners of Zhuang lived fairly well. Nominally, the Chancellor of the National Academy was in charge of the migration of the young commoners. However, in terms of the specifics, a senior brother named Fu Baosong was in charge. Under senior brother Fu, Jiang Luiyue felt much more relaxed and natural. This was because senior brother Fu didn't treat the migrating young commoners harshly. In the words he used to reprimand a few ruthless students, "What kind of people are thou abusing?" These commoners were now Zhuang commoners and couldn't be treated as if two armies were at war. In this kind of large-scale migration, the casualty rate was often not low. However, because of Fu Baosong's attentiveness and earnestness, there weren't many accidents. Compared to senior brother Lin Zhengrun, perhaps senior brother Lin was stronger and perhaps there were more benefits to following senior brother Lin. However, following senior brother Fu was the most reassuring. Fu Baosong didn't know what his senior and junior brothers were thinking. He also didn't know why the Chancellor of the National Academy thought so highly of him. He was just a down-to-earth person and conscientious in his work. This was the case in the past, in the present, and in the future. It was the coldest time of the year, so he had gritted his teeth to obtain a large number of cotton-padded clothes from the quartermaster. He was currently leading his senior and junior brothers to distribute them along the way. When he looked up, he seemed to see a faintly familiar face in the crowd. After some thought, he realized it was Maplewood City's Dao Academy's Zhang Linchuan, the cultivator who had appeared at the Three Cities Dao debate and was skilled in lightning techniques. The person who had barged into Wangjiang City's Dao Academy that night also claimed to be Zhang Linchuan. However, the side profile in the crowd only flashed past. Fu Baosong put down what he was doing and searched seriously for a while, but he didn't see it again. P.S. Hansu's entire plan should be clear after this chapter. Actually, there were some scenes that I wanted to write. For example, the scene of Yingge City rising from the ground was a little shocking. However, I was afraid that the readers wouldn't like it, so I skipped it. Basically, I will only follow my own creative philosophy. However, when there is room for negotiation, I am also willing to consider your feelings. It is a failure for the author to personally explain the plot to the readers. It means that the work itself is not convincing enough. Therefore, I didn't explain anything. I just asked them to have some confidence. Yesterday, I told people not to look at Qixin at least 4 times. I really lost my composure. In the future, I will try not to be direct with everyone. Everyone, please forgive my glass heart sometimes. Because I love this world too much, it's easy for me to be hurt by it. Chapter 697. Xin and City, Ancestral Hall. Dong A's death was a sacrifice for the country. He died in battle while holding the position of deputy minister, so he deserved to be honored. Hence, his coffin was placed in the Ancestral Hall. After the country war ended, Zhuang Gaoxian and Du Ruhui immediately returned to Xin and City. They did not even wait to settle down the army, leaving the heavily injured Huangfu Duanming to deal with it alone. Duanli could die, Ibadeo could die, as long as their deaths were worth it. However, Dong A's death was something that shook the country. Generals were easy to find, but ministers were hard to find. Previously, Dong A's death shook the entire battlefield, forcing Zhuang Gaoxian to bring forward the final battle. In hindsight, Dong A's death caused a lack of talent after Du Ruhui. It also prevented Du Ruhui from focusing on cultivation and reaching the true throne. Apart from Dong A, no one else had enough ability and prestige to become deputy minister. Now, Dong A's dismembered corpse was lying in the coffin. The various parts of his body were simply pieced together. His eyes were open, and his expression before he died was actually a smile. Dong A had not smiled for many years. Regardless of whether it was her promotion or the advancement of her cultivation, she always had a serious expression on her face. For so many years, he did not even smile politely. So much so that Du Ruhui even forgot that he could smile too. Furthermore, he smiled so wildly and so insolently. This guy had followed him for so many years. Unknowingly, he had grown from a serious young man to a serious middle-aged man. From a small constable who ran into walls everywhere, he grew up to be an awe-inspiring and extremely reliable deputy prime minister of the country. Then, he died and became a dismembered corpse. Du Ruhui lowered his head and stared at Dong A's open eyes. It was as if he wanted to see the face of the murderer in those eyes. Of course, it was futile. Those eyes had once imprinted the face of the murderer, right? However, it had already disappeared. Even though Du Ruhui's battle prowess was extraordinary and he was a first-rate divine descent expert, he still couldn't find an answer from those eyes. Zhuang country had obtained victory in the country war, but the deputy minister of the country had died. They still did not know who the murderer was. Be it Yong Luo, Mo, or Cheng, there were no signs of them doing anything. The first to investigate the cause of death was one of the 6 heroes of the academy, Lin Zhengrun, but he didn't find any useful clues. The corpse would never speak again, would never stand up against him. It sounded like a good thing, but it wasn't that good. Du Ruhui watched silently for a long time. Zhuang Gaoxian was standing beside him. Looking at his expression, he felt that his prime minister was getting old. "What jade is this?" Zhuang Gaoxian asked. He reached out and picked up a cyan jade slit ring from Dong A's corpse, which was right in front of her heart. Dong A's belongings were still in good condition. Even most precious double-world ruler was not lost. This piece of jade was one of the things he left behind. It was said that when the body was found, this piece of jade was just lying there and no one had moved it. Du Ruhui glanced at it, thought carefully, and said, "If I remember correctly, it should be left behind by Dong A's good friend, Zhang Xinliang." Zhang Xinliang? Zhuang Gaoxian was obviously unfamiliar with this name. Du Ruhui sighed. "Your Majesty, you shouldn't forget him. During the Nine Heavens altar meeting on Mount Yujing, he fought for resources for the Zhuang kingdom and died of exhaustion. So he's a hero of the Zhuang kingdom." Zhuang Gaoxian said seriously, "I shouldn't forget him." Du Ruhui didn't say anything else. He just reached out and took the piece of jade, about to put it back in Dong A's chest. But when the jade slit touched his finger, he suddenly frowned. "I remember that Dong A hasn't worn this piece of jade for a long time." "You mean?" Zhuang Gaoxian turned around. "This piece of jade could have been left behind by the murderer. I suddenly remember that Dong A once told me something." Du Ruhui rubbed the piece of jade in his hand and said suddenly. Zhuang Gaoxian looked at him with a questioning gaze. The old city master of Maplewood City, Lu Yan, asked for an explanation for the fall of Maplewood City. He said that he would kneel in front of the ancestral hall. Du Ruhui pointed outside the hall. "It's probably in that position." "What happened after that?" Even though it was a question, Zhuang Gaoxian's voice was emotionless. Dong A killed him to prevent any repercussions and announced that he died of illness. Dong A did the right thing. Zhuang Gaoxian said with a tone that seemed to be looking down on the world, but Lu Yan's family should be compensated. His children and juniors can be sent to the Taoist Academy to be nurtured. Lu Yan didn't have any children. When he stepped down from his position as the city master due to the decline of his cultivation, he didn't ask for anything. Du Ruhui's face was expressionless. He shook his head and said, "Dong A told me this not to ask for credit, but to ask for forgiveness. He said that he shouldn't have killed a meritorious official and asked me to remove him from his position." After ascending to the Dongjin stage, Zhuang Gaoxian had been consolidating his cultivation and exploring the new world of cultivation. Du Ruhui was still in charge of all matters of the country. That was why he didn't know about Lu Yan's matter. At this moment, his expression finally became serious. "Master Du, that was our decision." "No." Du Ruhui continued to shake his head. "Your Majesty, you are a wise ruler and cannot be tainted. That was my decision alone. I just He finally sighed. Dong A seemed to want to say something to me at that time, but he didn't say anything. His expression finally became bleak. It was as if he had endured an entire long winter, only to be met with late autumn. Dong A was buried with national rites, Zhuang Gaoxian said. Using national rites for a funeral was already the greatest honor. Du Ruhui gripped the green jade in his hand tightly. After a moment of silence, he said, I think I know why Zhu Weiwa suddenly knew the truth of Maplewood City and chose to betray the country. Zhuang Gaoxian's gaze was deep. He knew the culprit. The possibility of this jade that originally belonged to Zhang Xinliang and was later worn by Dong A appearing in the hands of the culprit was not high. Dong A had always been upright and plain-spoken. He didn't get close to women and was unmarried. It was impossible for him to have an illegitimate child. Connecting it to Zhu Weiwa's sudden betrayal, the possibilities were very small. Someone in Maplewood City, or Maplewood City's Dao Academy, had survived. This person must die. Du Ruhui gripped the jade and said seriously, It doesn't matter who he is. Naturally, Zhuang Gaoxian said, the vice minister of the Zhuang country cannot die without knowing why. Du Ruhui's hand that held the jade clenched into a fist. He was silent for a moment. Then he bowed toward Zhuang Gaoxian and turned to leave. Chapter 698. Exant and City stood silently under the sunlight as Du Ruhui flew out. The city guards looked up at the back of the figure in the sky with reverence in their eyes. The state minister was the stabilizing force of the Zhuang country. Whenever they saw him, they would feel at ease. Even if the upright deputy minister Dong A died in battle, even if the proud Zhu Weiwa betrayed the country, as long as the state minister was still around, the Zhuang country would never fall. The sky was high and the clouds were light. The familiar scenery of the Zhuang country flashed by. In order to avoid missing any clues, Du Ruhui didn't use imminent skyline. Instead, he relied on some kind of faint feeling to fly and search all the way. The heaven-breathing technique was a tracking technique that he grasped in his early years. There was only one heaven breath, 3 earth breaths, and endless human breaths. Using heaven breath to match human breaths, one could find the answer. As it was just an incomplete chapter, it wasn't accurate enough. It could only work when there was a certain gap in strength. From the traces at the scene, the murderer who killed Dong A was on par with Dong A. The murderer was able to kill Dong A mainly because he restrained himself. Du Ruhui was sure that the heaven-breathing technique could work. Moreover, he did capture a trace of energy from Dong A's corpse and used it to track down the murderer. However, the energy was weak and he couldn't sense it. It was also intermittent. However, he was prepared to spend a lot of time. His time was precious, but he felt that it was worth it to use it on this matter. As he flew, his eyes were like a hawk as he surveyed the mountains and rivers of the Zhuang country. He didn't let go of any suspicious corners. Tracking down the murderer wasn't something that someone of his status should be doing. Strictly speaking, he was using the country's weapon lightly. However, no matter who he handed this matter to, he couldn't be at ease. The Zhuang country welcomed an unprecedented victory, but at the same time, they encountered a huge gap in talent. Dong A, who was expected to be the next state minister, died in battle. Zhu Weiwa, who was expected to be the next state minister, betrayed the country. Originally, Duanli being crippled and He Bideo dying in battle was a sacrifice for the country's victory. It wasn't simply worth it. Now, it seemed like it was an unbearable burden. The two of them were the only experts in the Zhuang country who had hopes of reaching the God Ascension realm. Who could fill this huge gap in talent? Who had more hopes of reaching the top? Who was more worthy of being nurtured? The White Feather Army and the Nine Rivers Profound Armor both needed a new general. Many people were eyeing the position of Deputy Prime Minister, but not many had the ability. After Zhu Weiwa betrayed the country, who else would be able to bring out the Yellow River gathering that was previously planned? All of these things made him feel like he was in terrible shape. As the Prime Minister of the Zhuang state, he He had to worry about all the big and small matters in the Zhuang country. Even if there were some emotions that he could not shake off, he could not let them go. Yi Lingxiao said that he could not be himself. He could not deny it. He didn't even have time to grieve. On a nameless mountain, Jiang Wang had been unconscious here for a long time. He was curled up like a baby, unconscious. The black fog became thicker and thicker, wrapping around him like a black cocoon. Despair, isolation, and hopelessness. However, there was still a glimmer of light in the black cocoon. They were 3 tottering lights that never went out. In the empty hill, there was a faint sound of wild laughter. However, that laughter was occasionally interrupted by the sound of a sword. From time to time, the Sauvignon Blanc, which was tightly held in his hand, would suddenly let out a trembling sound, as if it was fighting against the maniacal laughter. The sword master was still unconscious, so the sword was naturally not a match for him. However, every time the sword was about to be suppressed, there was a chanting sound. Listening carefully, the Sanskrit chant was buzz, mi, ku, ga, cha, luo. This was the 8 syllables of the fearless Buddha heart, also known as the Manjushri 8 syllables incantation. This incantation had an extraordinary origin. It could show wisdom and suppress troubles. In the legends of the Buddhist sect, the wise Manjushri Bodhisattva was the left side attendant of Shakyamuni Buddha, representing Buddha's wisdom. The 8 syllables of the Manjushri 8 syllables rotated endlessly, helping the sword to fight against the maniacal laughter. Jiang Wang's eyes were tightly shut, and his frozen expression was particularly painful. However, his lips were moving, and he said in a calm and cold voice, "Old bald donkey, you delayed my important matters. Sooner or later, I will kill you and your entire family." The content of his words was extremely ruthless, but the black fog he controlled was extremely patient. Like a spider spinning a web, the black cocoon was intertwined bit by bit. It slowly but firmly eroded the host. The darker the black, the darker it was. It condensed in the day. The 3 faint lights in the black cocoon became fainter and fainter. However, in the next moment, as if sensing some kind of change, the black fog rolled violently a few times, unwilling to give up. It still couldn't completely extinguish the faint lights, so it stopped surging. Damn it! Jiang Wang, whose eyes were tightly shut, suddenly said. The black fog calmed down, and all of it drilled into the body as if it had a mind of its own. Jiang Wang, Jiang Wang, Jiang Wang. Wake up, wake up. It was a voice calling. It was very familiar and very urgent. The voice seemed to come from the deepest part of the water, slowly drilling out. Thus, the sea began to sway gently, and the waves began to spin freely. Everything in the world seemed to have a voice, and the feeling of liveliness returned to his heart. Jiang Wang slowly recovered from his chaotic state, but he was still in a daze. It seemed that many important things were piling up in his heart, but he couldn't remember anything. My inner demon, Dong, is dead. Did Jiang Yin faint, or was he eliminated? Xian City, Zhuang Gaoxian. Calm down, Jiang Wang. What's wrong? What's wrong with me? No, something's wrong. His thoughts were in a mess, exploding from here to there. It exploded until his brain was buzzing. His head hurt so much that it felt like it was about to split open, as if countless knives were cutting it, as if chisels were chiseling in his head. His body also felt very stiff, and every joint seemed to be very dry. Until now, he hadn't established a connection with his sword. Yes, my sword, he thought. It was a sword that could cut iron like mud. The sword's name was Chang Xiangxi. The process of its birth molded his love and hatred. It was hidden in the Shenlong wooden scabbard and nurtured with the seed of supernatural power. All along, there had been no one in front or behind him, only the sword in his hand. All along, he had been a man and a sword alone. He cut through mountains when he met them, and cut rivers when he met them. Not long ago, Chang Xiangxi had already cut down the person who had been longing for a long time. Yes, my sword, he murmured. It was as if he had found some kind of light, obtain some kind of clue. The sword intent of the human Tao began to condense. Jiang Yan's voice rang out before he could even cut a narrow path through all the complicated and painful things he had experienced. It's too late. Put on the invisibility cloak and use the means left behind by Yingguan, Jiang Yan shouted. Jiang Wang didn't think too much, because an instinctive fear had already surged into his heart, and a strong sense of danger exploded in his mind. He and Jiang Yan shared this body and also shared the crisis of life and death. Jiang Wang suddenly sat up. He instantly regained control of his body and almost subconsciously put on the invisibility cloak, activating the means left behind by Yingguan, and remained motionless. At the next moment, a figure that was flying at high speed whizzed across the sky. Black hair draped over his shoulders, and his aura was astonishing. His gaze swept over the small mountain, not stopping. Jiang Wang didn't speak. When he saw that black-haired figure, he had already completely awakened. A drop of cold sweat dripped from his temples. If Du Hui were here and saw him now, he would have no chance of survival. Chapter 699. Why is Du Hui back? Has Zhuang Yang's war ended? Did they win again? How long was I unconscious? It's not safe here. Leave quickly. Jiang Yan's voice urged in the sky-connecting palace. When did Jiang Yan wake up? He was attacked by Xiang Wing. What state is he in now? Can I deal with him? Where to? Jiang Wang asked subconsciously. Water. Clear river. Jiang Yan's voice was short and urgent, but it was powerful and firm. Why did I faint? Zhuang Gaoxian, Du Hui Dong. Hatred, where did my inner demon go? Countless thoughts surged in his mind that had just woken up from a life-or-death crisis. Jiang Wang held back those complicated emotions and trivial thoughts. He had already stumbled to his feet and began to run out. Clear river is behind you, Jiang Yan reminded him. How could he sense Du Ruhui's approach? Why is he so much more clear-headed than me? What is he? Oh, Jiang Wang answered confusedly. He turned and continued running. He slowly regained control of his body, but he did not choose to fly. Since the war had ended, most of Zhuang Yang's forces should have been withdrawn. It was too dangerous to fly in the air. Moreover, Du Hui had just passed by. Was Du Hui chasing after the murderer? How did he find the direction? Divination? Tracking? As he thought and pondered, he could already hear the sound of the river waves. After running for a while, his vision cleared up. It was like a snow-white jade belt embedded in the wilderness. 800 miles of clear river had opened its arms to him. Splash! Jiang Wang jumped into the water. He was like a big fish bobbing in the sparkling waves. For Transcendent Cultivator, holding his breath was not a problem. Because of the invisible clothes, he did not disturb the fish. Which way? He asked in the sky-connecting palace. Sun position, Jiang Yan said. Jiang Wang glanced around and swam towards the southwest. DUI position, Qian position. Jiang Yan did not say much. He only pointed the way once in a while. His goal seemed to be very clear. Why was he so familiar with Clear River? There were some questions that Jiang Wang could only ponder silently in his heart, but there were some that he could ask. How many days have I been unconscious? Do you know why I fainted? He asked as he swam in the water. I woke up not long before you did, Jiang Yan said. This sentence answered two questions at the same time. He must be hiding something. However, in Xian City, he was indeed severely injured by Xiang Wing, that prime minister country imprint indeed dimmed, no longer having any use. It shouldn't be fake. Jiang Wang thought and asked, Where are we going? Find a place to hide at the bottom of the river? No, Jiang Yan said. Let's go to the Clear River Manor. Only the restriction of the Clear River Manor could hide from Du Ruhui's senses. Just now on that mountain, Du Ruhui didn't use his spiritual sense, so he skipped over us. But since he had chased after them, it meant that stealth cloak could not be completely hidden from him. By the time he realized that something was wrong and returned, Yingguan's methods would no longer work. If we're discovered by him, there won't be a second ending. His reasoning was very clear and persuasive. Speaking of this, he seemed to sense something and added, Jiang Wang, I'm doing everything I can to find all the clues I can to save our lives. You'd better trust me enough. Am I not trusting you now? Jiang Wang asked back. I hope you remember that it was your recklessness that put us in this danger, Jiang Yin said faintly. Not everyone has the experience of being hunted down by Du Ruhui. Dong, it was so powerful. If there was still a divine ability in a residence in Xianan City, I might have died there. Although I made the right bet, but why did I make such a reckless choice? Maybe it was the guidance of the inner demon. But where did the inner demon go? Jiang Wang said, Yes, I was reckless this time. There was no need to quarrel with Jiang Yin now. But Jiang Yin had already taken the initiative to explain. When I woke up, I discovered that our inner demon was developing intelligence and wanted to take over this body. It was when it chased away the netherworld candle that I woke up. In the end, I worked with the star-twisting python to suppress it. Jiang Wang's heart skipped a beat. Suppress. Yes, it's suppressed inside the star-twisting python. There had been many twists and turns since he woke up, so it was only now that Jiang Wang noticed that the star-twisting python in the heavenly palace was curled up listlessly. It was rare that it was not moving. Can't you destroy it? Jiang Wang asked. I can't do it, Jiang Yin said. After all, you're the leader of the heavenly palace. When it's safe, you can deal with it yourself. All right, Jiang Wang observed the star-twisting python for a while, but did not choose to test it now. As Jiang Yin said, now is the time to run for his life. It was not the right time to tangle with the inner demon, but he still cast the soul flower seed to surround the star-twisting python. Although the star-twisting python was his Dao Vein true spirit, he had to be vigilant to suppress the inner demon. Jiang Wang thought for a while and asked, The Clear River Lord is working closely with the Zhuang Ting. If we go to the Clear River Manor now, won't we be walking right into a trap? Just don't let the Clear River Lord discover us. Jiang Yin seemed to have a plan. I hope I can do it, Jiang Wang said. It was impossible to hide from the Clear River Water Lord's senses in the Clear River Manor. Even with the invisibility cloak and Yinguan's methods, there would still be traces when moving. Jiang Yin did not say anything else. He just kept directing Jiang Wang to change direction. They swam and stopped along the way, avoiding a few patrols. The deeper they swam, the more remote and deserted they became. Finally, they came to a deep trench at the bottom of the Clear River. Jiang Yin did not tell Jiang Wang to go any further. Instead, he told him to stop in front of one of the cliffs. Long water vines covered both sides of the cliffs. There were extremely sharp barbs on the vines like fangs. There was a faint, terrifying aura, as if they could swallow someone at any time. They were definitely not easy to deal with. Inject a bit of water essence in the direction of the barbs and gently push them away. Then, you won't be attacked, Jiang Yin instructed. Jiang Wang followed his instructions. He refined some water essence and scattered it on the water vines. Then, he gently pushed them away. As expected, it was very smooth and peaceful. He then saw a hidden cave on the cliff of the deep trench. Okay, let's go in, Jiang Yin said. The cave looked very deep. Jiang Wang cautiously observed the environment for a while before finally walking in. He did not have much choice. Jiang Yin was right. Once Du Ruhui found him, there was no other outcome other than death. He might not even have the chance to fight. However, Jiang Wang thought to himself, Jiang Yin seemed to be very familiar with the Clear River Manor. He could even find such a hidden cave at the bottom of the river. Could it be that the White Bone Path specifically knew about the Clear River Manor? This possibility was not impossible. The founding ancestor of the Zhuang Kingdom, Zhuang Chengxian, had once made an alliance with Song Hengjiang. Zhuang Chengxian had once killed the White Bone Path. Then, it seemed logical that the White Bone God had paid attention to Zhuang Chengxian's allies. Everything was logical. Jiang Wang vaguely felt that something was wrong. However, he could not find the light. He shook his head and walked into the pitch-black cave entrance. It was like walking into an abyss. Chapter 700. At the bottom of Qing River, Jiang Wang stepped into the deep cave. The flowing water stopped there. There was no light source in the cave. When he looked out of the cave, the flowing water seemed to be tainted with the color of iron. It gave off an exceptionally heavy feeling. "What is this place?" Jiang Wang asked in Heavenly Palace. Jiang Yan's voice was faint. "Qing River Manor has a long history. I only know that this is a secret place of Qing River Manor. It is enough to isolate the aura and allow us to escape this calamity. However, there are no more details in Whitebone God's knowledge fragments. They might have been lost. I might need some clues to connect the dots." "I see." Jiang Wang did not show any suspicion as he walked forward in the dark cave. His extraordinary cultivation allowed him to have a clear vision in such an environment. There were strangely shaped, protruding rocks in the cave that looked like monsters baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. There were many marks on the walls on both sides, as though they had been torn apart by something. The underwater cave kept going downwards. As the passageway extended, it went deeper and deeper. He felt that it was like the mouth of a huge monster, and he was walking into the monster's stomach obediently, walking towards death. The cave was narrow at first, but it gradually expanded. As he walked deeper, it suddenly opened up. It was a huge circular cave. It was very orderly and had a kind of neat and symmetrical beauty. However, this open cave did not allow one to feel relaxed. On the contrary, there was only an extremely heavy pressure. This was because when Jiang Wang stepped into the cave, he had already seen a row of inverted stone coffins hanging on the walls of the cave. The stone coffins were black. There were strange blood-colored patterns carved on the coffins. It was the only source of light in the huge dark cave. However, the blood-colored patterns were complicated and strange. They seemed to be able to suck in one's gaze and pull at one's soul, entangling it tightly. Therefore, Jiang Wang calmed down and calmed his mind. Only then did he see the figure lying in the stone coffin. Only then did he realize that the stone coffin had no lid. He had overlooked it previously. The blood-colored patterns were too strange. He did not want to look at them. He tried to focus his gaze on the interior of the stone coffin. His senses were not much better. What kind of strange object was this? It had a pair of thick and solid ox hooves and a pair of skinny chicken claws. Its abdomen was bulging high, as if it was alive. Its belly button was constantly bubbling with blood. The head was a human head, but it was erratic and illusory. Its eyes were closed, and it was motionless. It was as if it was bound to the coffin by some kind of power. Jiang Wang's gaze swept past this thing. He looked around and saw that there was a sarcophagus hanging at intervals in the huge dark cave. Every sarcophagus contained a different deformed monster. The only thing they had in common was that they all had an illusory humanoid head. There were a total of 108 sarcophagi hanging on the walls of the cave, as if they were arranged in a mysterious formation. "What are these things?" Jiang Wang asked in his mind. He felt unfamiliar, strange, and a trace of fear that came from nowhere. He had also fought against evil spirits, seen evil spirits, and killed ferocious beasts before. Although these monsters in front of him were ferocious, they shouldn't be enough to bring him fear. "In demons," Jiang Yan said. "These things are all in demons. They're the most common and lowest level demons. Aren't demons in the desolate borders?" Jing and Mu used their armies to suppress them. Jiang Wang couldn't hide his shock. "Why are there demons in Qing River?" "I remember now." For some reason, Jiang Yan's voice was heavy. This should have been a demon's den in the past. In the ancient times, when the demon wave swept through the human world, this was one of the demon's dens. However, a demon's den like the one in Qing River should have been sealed long ago. There shouldn't be any new demons. These demons might be related to Song Hengjiang. "You mean Song Hengjiang, the water lord of Qing River, is raising these demons?" Jiang Wang was very serious. "Is there any other explanation? This is Qing River. Even Prime Minister Du Ruhui of Zhuang Country wouldn't be able to hide this from Song Hengjiang." This was earth-shattering news. Demons were the enemy of the human race. They were irredeemable enemies. In the ancient times, a demon wave almost destroyed the world. Even though several great eras had already passed and news of demons gradually only appeared in the desolate borders, the human race had never forgotten the fear they once brought. Even now, people would still use the word demon to describe terrifying existences. However, the water lord of Qing River, Song Hengjiang, was actually raising demons in the depths of Qing River. Once this news spread, the Clear River Manor would immediately become the enemy of the entire world. Jiang Wang's first reaction was to hold his breath, remain still, and erase his presence. Even though he was cloaked in concealment, even though he was supported by Ying Guan's methods, and even though there was no one here right now, it still did not give him a sense of security. Song Hengjiang would never let his guard down in such a crucial place. As soon as he was discovered, he would be silenced immediately. He really had just left the tiger's mouth and entered the wolf's den. Du Ruhui was obviously terrifying, but the master of Qing River, Song Hengjiang, couldn't be any gentler either. Only after concealing himself to the best of his ability did Jiang Wang have time to think about something else. As the master of Qing River, why was Song Hengjiang raising demons in the depths of Qing River? What good would that do for him? These Yin demons were the weakest demons, after all. No matter how powerful they were limited. Once they were exposed, they would immediately face destruction. Even with Song Hengjiang's extraordinary cultivation, he would not be able to protect himself. Whether it was Jing or Qin, they probably would not mind coming over to purge the demons. As a matter of fact, Zhuang Gaoxian would even clean house as soon as possible. The risk was so high, so how would it benefit him? Why is Song Hengjiang raising these Yin demons? Jiang Wang asked inside. Jiang Yin remained silent for a very long time. Perhaps it was a misconception, but Jiang Wang heard some difficulty in his voice. Did he know something? Let's take a look inside, said Jiang Yin. The huge, circular cavern had two entrances to the left and right. Who knew where they led to? Every entrance was between two stone coffins. Jiang Wang looked around for a while before asking, "Where do we go?" "To the left," said Jiang Yin. Jiang Wang did not know what basis his judgment was based on, but Jiang Yin was more experienced and knowledgeable about the unknown after all. After all, he was tainted by the white bone god's memory fragments. Thus, he walked to the left. The closer he got, the clearer he could see the sinister and disgusting details of the Yin demons in the stone coffins. Adding on the lingering stench, it was nauseating. Jiang Wang resisted the urge to pull out his sword and cut these Yin demons to pieces as he slowly walked in. Even though it was Jiang Yan's suggestion, he still had to be vigilant. Where would the giant cavern with 108 Yin demons lead to? Just as he walked to the left entrance, "Don't move," Jiang Yan suddenly warned in Tong Tian Palace. Jiang Wang turned to the side and stopped between two stone coffins, sticking to the stone wall without moving. His neighbor on the left had the body of a goat and the wings of a fly. His neighbor on the right had a half-coiled snake body under an illusory head. He was between two ugly Yin demons, sandwiched between two strange blood-patterned stone coffins. Then he saw the undercurrents stopped at the entrance of the demon cavern. A stooped figure wearing a gorgeous robe slowly walked in. The true master of Qing River, Song Hengjiang. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.